CD10.
Eager to take the natives' minds off weaponry and move their interaction off fighting and killing, Cook busies himself overseeing the giving of presents to them, iron and beads, something that has worked so well so far in their journey. Alas, alas, they care not for the profit items. No, what the natives truly want is obvious, those thundersticks, and they are happy to trade for them. Will you take this patu for that musket? Given that Marines and sailors have been hanged for less, the answer is a very firm no, indicated by grimacing and furiously shaking their heads. The natives, however, are not sure what the head-shaking signifies, and after several of them try to grab the muskets, Cook shouts to Tupaia to make clear what the dreadful consequences will be if they persist. "They must kill you if you snatch anything from them," Tupaia calls frantically. Is that understood? Not really. Captain Cook sees his men grip their muskets with intent, even as they narrow their eyes. The natives in turn tighten their hands around spears and ready themselves in the sand. The tension swells, a pregnant promise of pandemonium to come, though neither side is yet ready to act. Within a minute of the warning, one enormous native, a chief by the name of Terako, has grabbed a hanger, a short sword worn at the waist, from the astronomer Mr. Green, and is so pleased he lets out a cry of exultation before waving it triumphantly above his head as he retreats gently, entirely unaware of the danger he is in. For, oddly, the one who is most affected by the theft is neither Green himself nor any of the Marines, but one Joseph Banks, who, flushing with 2 parts fear to 1 part anger, speaks sternly to Cook. "It now appears necessary for our safety that so daring an act should be instantly punished," Banks declares, while shaping his musket, loaded with small shot, to shoot at the thief who is no more than 15 feet away. "Fire!" orders Captain Cook. A flash from Mr. Banks's musket. Never before has he shot at another man. A puff of smoke, an almighty blast, and on the instant, angry red splotches appear all over the native's back, haunches and thighs. And yes, the native's cries of exultation cease, but somehow he is still able to wave Mr. Green's hanger defiantly above his head. The white men stare, truly stunned. The men of this land are true warriors like they've never seen before, displaying the most unheard-of bravery they've ever heard of. The thief writhes in pain as the small shot nestles deep into his flesh, yet still he stands fierce in the face of this foreign incursion. Still the other natives are not foolhardy, and so move to the middle of the river, taking the higher ground upon a great rock. Taking matters into his own hands, Surgeon Monkhouse momentarily sets aside his sacred Hippocratic oath, first do no harm, and decides to do a great deal of harm indeed. He aims his pistol, loaded with a lead ball and not mere bird shot, at the staggering yet somehow still swaggering native, and fires. The warrior swaggers no more. The hanger drops from his limp hand, landing with a sandy splash on the river's edge. The native groans and falls beside it, stone, motherless, dead. Horrified, angered, uncomprehending all at once, 2 other natives come down from the rock and try to get to him, to check the body and grab the sword. But Dr. Monkhouse is too quick, and runs to grab the sword first. The remaining natives descend, whooping, howling cries of violent vengeance as they fly towards the invaders. The Marines turn their rifles as Cook, the doctor, and Tupaia level their own. "Kaure Horomai! Do not come here!" Tupaia screams, his message lost in the melee. They brace, take position, aim, and fire. Clearly they hit their mark, as 3 of the natives fall wounded, one seemingly a good deal hurt, and the rest of the natives must retrieve the wounded and drag them safely back across the river. Cook gives the word to his men that it is time to return to the Endeavour. All of them are exultant. A battle, a real genuine battle, and we are victors. This is the adventure they have yearned for, the promise of noble battles with savages fulfilled. Once on the boats, however, and pulling away from the shore, the mood starts to turn sombre and even dark. Have they really just killed 2 men and wounded 3 others since arriving not 1 day ago? Captain Cook himself looks back with horror at the 2 dead bodies, piles of prone, lifeless flesh where warriors once stood proud. Their deaths are on his conscience. A shame there had been no recourse, no option that avoided bloodshed. Both James Cook and Joseph Banks are visibly affected, the weight of their actions hanging heavily. Banks's was the first shot, the catalyst for the murderous mayhem that followed. For now, though, the men are thankful for the distraction of the water, the focus of this entire endeavour. The river proves too silty and salty to be potable, and thus their search must continue. Later that night, the men of the Endeavour row to the north, heading for the uppermost point of the bay. Captain Cook and Joseph Banks continue to reflect on how badly everything has gone thus far, while the Marines still ride high on the afterglow of a battle won, adrenaline a fresh memory. All are lost in thought until coming nearer the shore. How on earth are they supposed to land there? The waves are monsters, great falling walls beating into the sand and exploding with white fury. Suddenly, they spy a native watercraft, moving through the surf as though it were no trouble. A canoe with a sail. No, 2 canoes. The second canoe has no sail and, upon seeing the ship, makes for shore. The sailing canoe, however, keeps coming straight for them. Have they not seen us? It appears not. Cook orders his men to row towards the canoe. When it is close enough, Sidney Parkinson gets a good look at the vessel, which is 30 feet long, made of planks sewed together, and had a lug sail made of matting. The hooks, lines, nets, and spears make clear its purpose. They are fishermen, returning from the morning's catch, completely unaware that James Cook has designs to catch them. After all, the small, lighter spears they carry are designed for fish, not men. These are the perfect natives to capture, as there will be no question of more violent conflict. Surely they can be safely approached and shown that, despite the unfortunate deaths so far, the natives have nothing to fear from the visitors. Tupaya? The indispensable holy man calls out to those in the canoes, encouraging them to come aboard peacefully. It's safe, no, really. For their part, the natives are now acutely aware of the white men in their bay, and it is clear by their expressions they are desperate to be rid of them. "Come alongside," Tupaya calls to them regardless. "We will not hurt you." The startled fishermen are not disposed to find out. Furiously paddling, the natives pull away from the Endeavour's boats. As Banks notes, "The fishing canoe, she outran our boat." Very well then, it is time for that most ancient but still most reliable of English remedies, a whiff of the grape. "Fire a musket over their heads," orders Cook, in the hope that the shattering noise will either make them surrender or jump overboard. No chance. Far from the fire cowing them, it fires them up. Yes, they stop paddling, but only to lift up their paddles in defiance, from fishermen to warriors in a flash. The moment the white men come alongside, the natives unleash upon them a barrage of blows with their paddles, followed by a deluge of hurled and accurately aimed rocks. In the next moment, there are shattering blasts. Screams fill the air. Blood bursts forth. Teeth fly. Several natives fall into the water. Others leap. After the deadly volley, 4 of the 7 fearless fishermen, turned warriors, are bobbing in the bloodied water, face down. The 3 other natives are trying to swim away. A couple of the natives are scooped up by the brawny sailors, significantly easier to catch than the fish they had preyed upon. They are but boys, one no more than 10 or 12 years old, and the other not much his senior. Now aboard, the 3rd native must be seen to. He is a skilled swimmer cutting through the water away from the pursuing boat. Yet no swimmer can outrun a modern yawl, and it quickly pulls up beside the aquatic escapee. Plucked out of the water like his friends before him, the third boy does his utmost to fight back, writhing and thrashing like an eel out of water, making every effort in his power to prevent being taken into the boat, but losing in the end. James Cook sees that all three are no more than shivering, fearful boys who, having been captured by an enemy, look like they're awaiting their imminent execution. They all seem to squat with their heads bowed, and to the eyes of the white men it looks as if they are submitting to their fate. But the killing blow never comes. Whatever these white men want, the boys are more valuable than fish. The first of the boys to realize these strange visitors will not hurt them, or at least feel his curiosity outweigh his quite reasonable fear, steals a glance away from the floor of the yawl towards the foul-smelling white men in front of them. The others join in. Coming now into the shadow of the biggest canoe any of them have ever seen, the lads grow wide-eyed with wonder, shocked at its sheer size, and still reeling from what they thought was certain death. On deck they are treated well, given clothes to wear. Delightedly, the lads try on torn breeches and stained shirts, laughing to see each other so robed, along with beads and nails to marvel at, bread to eat, and plenty of water, which they gulp by the gallon, likely having not had a drop since going out fishing earlier that morning. Recognizing they won't be killed, today at least, the lads begin to bombard Tupaia with endless questions. The lads remarkably seem to recover their spirits in a very short time, which is more than can be said for Joseph Banks and Cook. Cook, a man with Quaker roots and a father of 4 wee bairns himself, who often thinks of them and misses them desperately, is keenly aware that in all likelihood there are wee bairns in a native village nearby who will shortly hear that their fathers will never return to them. And he, James Cook, has been the cause of that tragedy. But did he have a choice? With one eye on the Admiralty and one on history, he records in the ship's log his distress, his regret, and, most importantly, his justification for what has happened. I am aware that most humane men, who have not experienced things of this nature, will censure my conduct in firing upon the people in their boat, nor do I myself think that the reason I had for seizing upon her will at all justify me. And had I thought that they would have made the least resistance, I would not have come near them. But as they did, I was not to stand still and suffer either myself or those that were with me to be knocked on the head. Even Joseph Banks, who has been able to meet the death of English sailors and companions with something that, if you catch it at just the right angle with the sun shining from behind, looked perilously like a shrug, finds himself deeply affected. After all, the other deaths had not been caused directly by him. They had simply occurred. But today he had been the man who had fired a musket at a man. Yes, it had only been a small shot, but then Monkhouse had followed up with an actual lead ball. It means he, Joseph Banks, had begun the murderous melee that ended with 4 fishermen fallen. Thus ended, he finishes his journal account this evening, the most disagreeable day of my life has yet seen. Black be the mark for it, and heaven send that such may never return to embitter future reflection. The only relief for Captain Cook and Joseph Banks is to see that the native boys are now calm and happy. Cook going so far as to remark they seemed much less concerned at what had happened than I was myself. They appear to bear their captors no ill will, which is an unexpected relief. Tupaia relates to the white men the identities of their catch. Tahoranga there, he is 18. He was the great swimmer who tried to elude you. Koikaranga is his brother, the middle boy at 15 years old. Finally, the little one, his name is Maragoeta, and he is only 10 years old. The lads spend a warm day and evening on the Endeavour. This meeting of worlds is not without its troubling moments, however. One such moment comes in the mess at lunch, when a freshly slaughtered lamb is served, and the native lads wonder if perhaps this is human flesh. No, Why? Because the only animal this large in our land is human. But do you eat humans? They seemed ashamed of the custom, Banks chronicles, saying that the tribe to which they belonged did not use it, but that another very near did. Tupaia is among the most shocked, having never heard of such a thing, and insists to the boys that such a thing is very, very wicked. Yes, in Tahiti and its surrounding islands, human sacrifice is practiced as a part of religious ceremonies, but actually eating humans is disgusting to him. Still, they talk of many other things too, on much happier subjects, even as they tuck into generous helpings of salt pork, served for dinner, with nearly as much enthusiasm as they wolf down enormous slabs of bread, and keep talking until the midnight watch is about to head up on deck, whereupon the boys are invited to bed down for the night, upon the long transom seats beneath the great cabin's stern windows, whereupon they laid down to sleep, with all seeming content imaginable. On the shore, however, there is no such content. Late at night, Cook awakes to the sound of angry voices drifting through the great cabin's open windows from the shore. The natives' rage-filled discourse is heard through the night. While Cook spends an uneasy night tossing and turning, unable to properly get back to sleep, Joseph Banks is, strangely, awoken by a lullaby. Emerging from the land of Nod, he can, yes, hear not just singing, but something of a choir. What on earth can it be? Finding his slippers, he pads up towards the deck, the singing getting clearer with every step. Oh! He emerges from the hatchway to find that it is Tupaia, with the 3 native boys and his own servant lad, Taieto, who was about the same age as the youngest captive. They had woken in fear, and Tupaia, intent on looking after them, had encouraged them to start singing a soft song they all know. The lads sing, and Tupaia nods his encouragement. Delighted, Banks chronicles it as a song of their own, and contained many notes and semitones. They sung it in parts, which gives us no indifferent idea of their taste as well as skill in music. Through Tupaia, the 3 lads are happy to talk with the white man, each of them learning from one another's culture. They continue to the wee hours of the morning, at which point Banks has had enough and must retreat to his bed. Captain Cook emerges on deck at first light to find his 3 guests dressed and ornamented with bracelets, anklets, and necklaces after their own fashion and in remarkably good spirits. Which is as well, for the captain has a very simple plan for the day, which relies on exactly that. I intended to put our 3 prisoners ashore, and stay here the day to see what effect it might have upon the other natives. As the young captives heartily wolf down their breakfast, the only souls on board who look at sea biscuits with such enthusiasm, Cook sends a party of men, accompanied by marines on shore, to collect wood. They are all under strict instructions to land on the eastern side of the river, and to have no contact with the natives. There can be no repeat of the disasters of the previous 2 days. Once they are dispatched, Cook, Banks, the doctor, Tupaia, and the 3 satiated native lads head to shore too, this time landing on the west side of the river, where the natives had formed and performed their terrifying war dance. It is also where Cook can't help but notice the victims of their 2 previous meetings still lie on the eastern bank. Those corpses are a terrible reminder of their failures up until this point. Landing the pinnace on the sandy beach, James Cook, Banks, and Tupaia all encouraged the lads to go, to join their people, and yet they were very unwilling to leave us, Cook chronicles, pretending that they should fall into the hands of their enemies, who would kill and eat them. But the captain insists. They cannot stay in the company of the white men any longer. Regardless of their reluctance, the boys now drag themselves up the beach, seemingly sorry to say goodbye to the white men, and fearful of what may await them here on the shore. Whatever fate may befall them, Cook is distracted now by the approach of the men in the distance. Yes, There are a handful of large natives now coming their way, holding— Hold on. It is actually a lot more than a handful. It's a large mass of natives emerging onto the beach, a way off but approaching with intent. Quickly, Cook and his party ford the river, joining the party of sailors and marines who have come down from the woods and are gathered on the eastern bank. Taking stock of his men, Cook notices the 3 native lads among their number. Nothing Cook or Tupaia can signal or say will persuade them to leave, and, in any case, there is no time to tarry, as a bristling mob of 200 natives are gathering on the other side of the river, all of them armed, all of them looking aggrieved. Tupaia, Cook chronicles, now began to parley with them. When Tupaia's efforts appear foiled, and the natives across the river seem only angrier than before, to Cook's great amazement, Koikaranga, the middle lad, steps forward, takes the beads and nails and handkerchiefs he has received from the white men, and carefully places them on the body of the man that Banks and Dr. Monkhouse had shot and killed the day before. The presents and Tupaia's pleading seem to do the trick. For now, one native tentatively crosses the river, while the rest sit down on the sand carefully watching. Cook and his men crowd around the lone native and shower him with gifts, as do the 3 native boys, who pass on some of their own presents while saying what must be soothing words to him. Cook invites the native man to join them on the ship, but he refuses, and the conversation appears ended. No, it is not quite peace that reigns, but at least it is not attack unleashed. With that small triumph achieved, and the dozens upon dozens of New Zealand natives still sitting peacefully enough on the opposite riverbank, Cook decides to take all his men back to the Endeavour. I now thought proper to take everybody on board, to prevent any more quarrels, and with us came the 3 natives, who we could not prevail upon to stay behind. Rowing away, the white men watch the sole native man go up to the edge of the woods, where he picks up a green bough. With this in his hand, Joseph Banks notes, he approached the body with great ceremony, walking sideways. He then threw the bough towards it and returned to his companions, who immediately sat down around him and remained above an hour, hearing probably what he said without taking the least notice of us. Back on deck, Tupaia explains this is an act of mourning. Cook and Banks can see through their spyglasses that the natives have at last decided to carry off the body by the river, though it can't be forgotten that they have left the corpse of the Chief Tamaro killed on the first day. It still lies on the eastern bank. For what reason it must remain, the white men cannot guess, but they do presume that the other body must have been taken as a ratification of peace, a sign that the battle is over. After dinner, Cook summons his translator. Tupaia, ask the boys if they now have any objection to going ashore at the same place. Tupaia and the boys confer. Any objection? Ka hore he whakahe. We have not, the boys chorus. Cook sends 2 midshipmen in the yawl to row the 3 boys ashore, with strict instructions to leave them so they are left. From the quarterdeck, Cook and Banks watch closely, with rising tension, as the boys approach the riverbank. Are they to be welcomed back as prodigal sons, or struck down as tribal traitors for having broken bread with the white warriors? And here now is a native man in a catamaran, a remarkably sophisticated-looking double canoe with sleekly designed and decorated hulls, and a flat platform between from which a sail billows, coming out from the shore. This native, at least, seems to greet the boys well as he takes them on board, and takes them back to the river. Once ashore, no fewer than 50 native men emerge, embrace the lads, and they all sit and talk until the sun starts to set. Whereupon the men stand, and the lads run back to the shore and wave their hands to those watching them from the Endeavour. Whether it is in joy or sorrow, or even a simple farewell, it is not possible to determine, but they have certainly got through the day unharmed, which is a good start. We therefore hope that no harm will happen to them, Banks notes, especially as they had still the clothes which we gave them on. The sense that the boys are fine, and are perhaps even speaking up for the white visitors, grows as eventide descends, and animated but not angry voices float across the waters to the Endeavour. Cook decides to move the Endeavour a little further from the shore, just for added safety. At dawn, he orders the anchor weighed and sails out of this place, which he has decided to call Poverty Bay, for the simple reason it afforded us no one thing we wanted. Even the inimitable specimen-collecting naturalist Joseph Banks leaves more empty-handed than he would like, recording that they set sail with not above 40 species of plants in our boxes, which is not to be wondered at, as we were so little ashore, and always upon the same spot. What is next? My intention is to follow the direction of the coast to the southward, Cook writes, as far as the latitude of 40 or 41 degrees, and then to return to the northward, in case we meet with nothing to encourage us to proceed farther. 11th of October, 1769. Poverty Bay. The Endeavour gains 3. South of Poverty Bay the following afternoon, the Endeavour finds itself at a small island. They are still close enough to shore to be quickly surrounded by an armada of vessels. At the prow of each is carved the head of a man with an enormous tongue reaching out of his mouth. It is unlike anything the white men have ever seen, Mr. Banks recording. These grotesque figures were some at least very well executed. Some had eyes inlaid of something that shone very much. The whole served to give us an idea of their taste, as well as ingenuity in execution, much superior to anything we have yet seen. The trained eye of Sidney Parkinson takes it all in, soaking up the detail for his later drawing. The bottom of their canoes was made out of a single tree, and the upper part was formed of 2 planks, sewed together, narrowed both at head and stern. The former was very long, having a carved head at the end of it painted red, and the stern ended in a flat beak. They had thwarts to sit on, and their paddles are curiously stained with a red colour, disposed into various strange figures. And the whole together was no contemptible workmanship. All of the vessels are filled with seemingly friendly natives, though to a man they are just that, all male. Sidney Parkinson looks very closely and winces. They tie their foreskins to their girdle with a string and have holes pierced in their ears. But where are the women? After the joys of the flesh that had been experienced in Tahiti, the sailors and a good number of the officers and gentlemen are eager to see just what kind of women this strange land has, and whether they might be available. The natives make clear they wish to clamber aboard and get whatever presents the white men have to give. What on earth has happened to change the whole attitude of the natives? Cook soon has his answer, after Tupaia interprets. The people in this boat had heard of the treatment those had met with we had had on board before, and therefore came on board without hesitation. While pleased at the way things are turning, Joseph Banks, for one, is more than a little sceptical that their troubles in this strange land are over. He does not doubt the sudden friendliness of the New Zealand natives, but doubts whether this will be true throughout the land. God send that we may not there have the same tragedy to act over again, as we so lately perpetrated, he writes in his journal. The country is certainly divided into many small principalities, so we cannot hope that an account of our weapons and management of them can be conveyed as far as we in all probability must go, and this I am well convinced of, that till these warlike people have severely felt our superiority in the art of war, they will never behave to us in a friendly manner. For the moment, however, there can be no doubting the friendliness of the natives on board. When Cook, through Tupaia, explains that the Endeavour will shortly be sailing south to look for other harbours, as this place provides little of what they need, they make a singular request. Given that Cook has brought Tupaia from Tahiti, perhaps Cook could take 3 natives with him, just as the Endeavour had already taken the 3 boys on board. Their logic, Tupaia explains, is that if Cook takes 3 with him, they will be able to eventually return to tell the rest where the Endeavour, this extraordinary vessel, is now. It will likely be for just a few days, and they might be useful for telling other natives that there is nothing to be afraid of with the white men. Amused, Cook agrees. The Endeavour sails south with 3 proud native men aboard, waving goodbye to their people and promising to return with news of their adventure. Alas, during the night, the wind blows so strong, and the Endeavour sails with such speed that the 3 natives begin to weep, thinking that they will never see land again. With the aid of Tupaia, Cook tries to reassure them that in the morning they will still be within sight of the land, as they have gone along the coast, not away from it. But still they remain tense until the morning comes and they can see for themselves the blessed land. As well as land, the next morning brings the sight of 2 canoes paddling towards the ship in the morning sun. Friends. As the canoe comes alongside the ship, the natives see that it is more than a trade procession, as one of the canoes contains an old man dressed in fine kakahu, or clothing, and he is carrying a patu made of whalebone, both signs of high status and power, or mana to the native, a chief. After a brief conversation with the white men and the native men, the old man takes his leave. In tow are all 3 natives, shinnying down the rope and back onto the canoe, much to our as well as their satisfaction. Slowly but surely the Endeavour sails south along the east coast, stopping occasionally whenever the crew spies curious natives in canoes. Tupaia, as always, greets every new party with his characteristic charm, each time meeting with various levels of success. Sometimes the natives dare not come within a quarter mile, other times spitting distance. Sometimes they come aboard to trade and talk, other times they threaten with their spears and patus. The latter is always met with a warning shot from a musket, which is always enough to force a hasty retreat. Southwards, ever southwards, the Endeavour sails on, the wind getting still more chilly, while the white cliffs give way to fertile green hills before giving way again to unruly swampy lowlands. This is a land of many differing scenes, an extraordinary array of unexpected aspects. For look now. In sailing along shore, Banks notes, we could clearly see several spots of land cultivated, some fresh turned up and laying in furrows like ploughed land, others with plants growing upon them, some younger and some older. We also saw in 2 places high rails upon the ridges of hills, but could only guess that they belonged to some superstition as they were in lines, not enclosing anything. On the 15th of October, just as high and regal mountains crowned with tips of white become visible off to their distant starboard, the Endeavour shortens sail as it arrives off the southern headland of a gloriously vast and sweeping bay, which Cook decides to christen Hawke's Bay, in honour of Sir Edward Hawke, First Lord of the Admiralty. Not long after they drop anchor just abreast of the southwest point of the bay, canoes filled with natives come out, presenting an amazingly colourful spectacle that pleases the eye of Sidney Parkinson, as he notes, "Their spears were not unlike our sheriff's helmets, having red and yellow tassels tied to them. In one of their canoes we saw a hatchet made of the green stone in shape like those of Tahiti." The ever-searching eyes of Mr. Banks, too, are quick to spot the green stone, noting, "Some of our people imagined it to be a jewel. Myself thought it no more than the green stone of which most of their tools and ornaments are made of." The natives of New Zealand seem to prize it. Each canoe is between 50 and 60 feet long, and has around 20 warriors aboard, with 18 paddles, and each one is a work of art in itself. Sidney Parkinson studies the craft in detail. They were adorned with fine heads made out of a thick board, cut through like filigree work, in spirals of very curious workmanship. At the end of this was a head, with 2 large eyes of mother of pearl and a large heart-shaped tongue. This figure went round the bottom of the board, and had feet and hands carved upon it very neatly and painted red. He had also high-peaked sterns, wrought in filigree, and adorned with feathers, from the top of which depended 2 long streamers, made of feathers, which almost reached the water. Typically, Parkinson cannot wait to do a drawing of them, and with Tupaia closely watching his method, immediately begins sketching, even as the natives themselves pull alongside and do 2 of their versions of a hava, or is it a war dance? The white men aren't sure. They beat time with their paddles, and ended all at once with the word epa, at the same instant striking their paddles on the thwarts, all which afforded a truly comic act. As for trade, a bemused Banks records, "They sometimes cheated us by bargaining for one thing and sending up another when they had got their prize." And so the bartering continues. A basket of fish for a mirror, an armful of kumara, a kind of sweet potato, for a piece of cloth. Captain Cook himself seeks to make an exchange for a kind of coat being worn by one of the warriors, which to his eyes looks to be something like a bear skin, which I was desirous of having, that I might be a better judge of what sort of animal the first owner was. Would the native give it to him, in exchange for a piece of red baize? He seemed to jump at it, by immediately putting off the skin and holding it up to us, but would not part with it until he had the cloth in his possession. And that is where the trouble starts. For as an amused Joseph Banks chronicles, no sooner had the man got hold of it than he began with amazing coolness to pack up both it and his fur jacket in a basket, entirely deaf to the captain's demands. The other natives are suddenly seemingly deaf to the king's English, for altogether they paddled furiously away. Well, it is only a piece of red cloth, and Cook thinks it is a lesson cheaply learnt. He is not alarmed when a short time later another canoe approaches, this time with natives offering fish. This time, after consultation with the officers, a combination of looking-glasses and tomahawks is enough to have the natives agree to part with their whole canoe. For the men of the Endeavour, what a sensation it would make, and how interested the people would be once they got it back to London. They are about to get a line around the head of the canoe, hoping to haul her on board the way they would an anchor, when it happens. Taieto, known to the Jacks as Tupaia's little boy, happens to be in the main chains, standing on one of the platforms by the side of the ship at the bow, from where the sailors swing the lead, and as the natives in the canoe come alongside, one of the warriors stands up, grabs the boy, and pulls him into the canoe, before they too are paddling furiously away. The cry goes up, and many muskets, always kept loaded, primed, and at hand when the natives are about, are brought to bear, aimed at those natives farthest away from Taieto. And fire! The muskets roar. In the canoe, 3 natives suddenly slump, falling back on the men behind them. In the chaos, Taieto is able to break free from the native holding him, jump overboard and start swimming back towards the Endeavour. "Lower the pinnace, and fire the cannon!" Yes, for good measure, sending some cannonballs the way of the natives will make the point that the white men are not to be trifled with. It is done within the minute as the orders ring out, "Bear a hand! Bear a hand!" Before the natives can gather themselves, the pinnace is launched, the cannon creates further havoc, and Taieto has been gathered up, all while the natives beat, in time, despite the pandemonium, a hasty retreat. Taieto climbs the rope slower than the Jacks have ever seen him move. There is a weariness in his movement. A lad who, having given the last ounce of energy he has to fear, now has little left to give to anything, not even relief. Compounding his exhaustion are his drenched clothes, thick and heavy, impeding his every move. Reaching the deck, he falls to the wooden floor with a thud, shivering from the cold, unable to lift even his head. Yet, by the same token, he is also relatively quick to recover, and it is not long before the Taiato they all know and love has returned to them. A bounce back in his step, Joseph Banks watches as the boy walks over to retrieve something from a pail by the mizzen. He then approaches his master, Tupaia, bearing what Banks sees is a fine fish that had been previously traded for. "I intend," Taiato tells the priest, "to offer this to Ayatua, or God, in gratitude for my escape." "I approve," Tupaia says heartily. "You must throw it into the sea." The two walk together to the gunwale, where Taiato goes ahead with his offering. The fish flies over the side, a lucky escapee released by one and the same, returning whence it came. "This affair," Captain Cook chronicles that night, "occasioned my giving this point of land the name of Cape Kidnapper." 17th of October, 1769. Southwest of Hawke's Bay, Hawke's Eye View. A skua bird would see it perfectly from on high, a strange thing never observed in these parts before. It is a great canoe sprouting billowing white, coming to a halt off a large bay, at which point the billowing white sags loosely, before the enormous vessel turns, heading back into the eddying remains of its own wake. Interested, the bird sways and swirls in the breeze, following it along, tracking its journey past Cape Kidnapper, past Hawke's Bay, past Poverty Bay. Whenever it comes to rest, it is quickly met with a flotilla of tiny trading vessels, throwing off sparkling water on both sides. Sometimes their meetings lead to peace, bartering trade and friendly relationships. Other times they end in a thunderous roar, followed by hurried and harried paddling away. Conversation, commerce, or conflict, the white above the great canoe soon starts to billow once more, and again it moves on. Late October 1769. East Coast New Zealand. Where the line goes, nobody knows. The captain sits at the oak bureau in his private cabin, pondering the charts spread before him. His eyes are drawn with no little pride to the nascent first chart of New Zealand's east, or at least the first drawn by a European. Lingering a moment, James Cook pinpoints the position of the Endeavour's about face a couple of days prior, and names it Cape Turnagain. As for the weathered white cliff he had seen this late afternoon, the one that so resembled the gable of a house, he names it Gable End Foreland. And there the line on his chart stops abruptly, as it must until the morrow, when Cook will start again, observing the coast, sounding the depths, marking the newly discovered contours of this unknown land, all in the hope of making some important discoveries, by way of harbours, major rivers or the like. Perhaps they are even now circumnavigating the great southern land. Cook does not believe so, but keeps his counsel, while Joseph Banks is openly convinced that they are already sailing on the eastern edge of Dalrymple's geographical dream. They only need to keep on sailing to confirm its extraordinary size. Cook folds up the chart and places it safely in the top drawer of the bureau. He disrobes and snuffs out the light in the room, a fine candle. It is a near nightly ritual in his rigorously disciplined life. In the morning, Captain Cook spies 2 bays and orders Master Molyneux to bring her into the northernmost one, where they anchor in 7 fathoms on a black sandy bottom in the forenoon of the 20th of October, 1769. This time, the natives who paddle out to the ship seem friendly without reservation, and Cook is able to invite them aboard and ply them with gifts, for he wants no repeat of the events at Poverty Bay. The natives respond in kind, readily answering the queries of where the men of the Endeavour could secure fresh water, and Cook sends men ashore with barrels with orders to fill them. The work is slow, owing to a high surf upon the shore, but it is done. The following day, Mr. Banks and the doctor take the opportunity to make their own landing at this place called Tegadoo, to gather specimens and make observations. and Banks is soon impressed beyond measure by a particular discovery. For here now are the loveliest forms that nature has to offer: women. No, not bare-breasted like the Tahitian maidens, but alluring and certainly a vital force in this impressive community. Men, women and children gather as one to form a welcoming party, bestowing an air of normality on proceedings. Banks is impressed with the settlement laid out before him. One piece of cleanliness in these people I cannot omit, as I believe it is almost unexampled among Indians, he chronicles. Every house, or small knot of 3 or 4, has a regular necessary house, where everyone repairs and consequently the neighbourhood is kept clean, which was by no means the case in Tahiti. They have also a regular dunghill, upon which all their offals of food, etc., are heaped up, and which probably they use for manure. Outhouses, compost heaps. This is an advanced people, and they meet with the white men on the basis of presumed equality. When the white men visit people in their villages and go into houses, men, women and children received us. No one showed the least signs of fear. Now, when it comes to the native women, it is not as if they do not have their charms, far from it. But Banks's key wish, as with many men of the Endeavour, is that they would not paint their faces with red ochre and oil, as it is generally still fresh and wet upon their cheeks and foreheads, and therefore easily transferable to the noses of anyone who should attempt to kiss them. Not for nothing are sailors often showing up back at the Endeavour with red noses. For the main thing remains that the women are generally available. While more modest in their carriage and decent in their conversation than the islanders, if the consent of their relations was asked, and the question accompanied with a proper present, it was seldom refused. Such presents include cloth, beads, and ribbons, but even then, the strictest decency must be kept up towards the young lady, or she might balk the lover after all. The English sailors learn as they go along. When one of the midshipmen approaches a native family of the better sort, for there really are strata of classes among them, most readily discernible by the quality of their garments, seeking the favours of one of the daughters, Banks records the response of the family matriarch. "Any of these young ladies will think themselves honoured by your addresses," he is told firmly, "but you must first make me a proper present, and must come and sleep with us ashore, for daylight should by no means be a witness of such proceedings." To help things along, they are sure to take Tupaia with them on every journey ashore, as he has proven himself an indispensable bridge between two worlds, the best chance they have of both sides going back and forth without losing their lives. He is capable of enabling both the passage of goodwill and, more importantly, translating to the natives the supreme, otherworldly power of the Europeans. In fact, more than that, he is picking up European skills, delighting no less than the quiet Quaker Sidney Parkinson one evening with his rendering of Mr. Banks trading with the New Zealand natives. Fabulous, Tupaia. The Scottish artist is delighted to see his pupil coming along so quickly, creating works full of salient detail and tolerably pleasing to the eye. All through the capes and inlets of the North Island, Tupaia's name has travelled, his prestige preceding him. Tupaia has come. His legend has grown to the point that when the Endeavour drops anchor, the canoes of natives will come out and ask for him by name. The Tahitian holy man explains their reasons for coming, and that "we will neither hurt nor molest you if you behave in the same peaceable manner to us." Helpfully, the natives even speak of a location to the south, a lovely little bay with good anchorage and accessible water. Talago, Talago, Talago. The natives will not cease repeating the name, though it means little to the white men. Thankfully, Tupaia can confirm that this is their name for bay, and so it is one of those rare occasions where the native name for a feature is actually marked on the captain's map. A short time after the Endeavour arrives, busying themselves by gathering wild celery and scurvy grass, which is welcomed by the captain and served to the men forthwith, the locals lead Tupaia to a sacred cave of notably high arch, high on a hill, and inform him that it is his. Recognizing the enormous honour that has been accorded to him, Tupaia gravely accepts the gift, and in the course of the Endeavour's time there, 6 days, receives many visitors in his cave, where he is almost drowned with even more gifts, draped with precious cloaks, and welcomed as an honoured guest among the Whare Wanaga. There, in the fleeting light of the village's perpetual flame, which has been carried upon a flax wick up the meandering path to the cave, Tupaia speaks long and strong with the local priests, of spirits, gods, and the land where their ancestors live. As it happens, both parties are in agreement on questions of religion. Tupaia was a great favourite with our fathers, the locals will say thereafter, so much so that to gratify him, several children who were born in the village during his sojourn with us were named after him. That cave will ever after be known as Rua a Tupaia, Tupaia's Cave. Of course, the native names for geographical features often amuse the white men, but on a trip ashore at Talago Bay, Mr. Banks and the doctor hear about one that will amuse them for years to come. That splendid rock formation, for example, that tight, circular cavern that leads through a large rock to the sea. To the impressed eyes of Joseph Banks, it is an extraordinary natural curiosity, a most noble arch, certainly the most magnificent surprise I've ever met with. The locals, however, are less fussed. They refer to it in rather less glowing terms as Te Kōtere o Te Whenua, the anus of the land. Charmed, they're sure. Sidney Parkinson, meanwhile, is genuinely charmed, though not with strange native names. No, Mr. Parkinson is transfixed with the beautiful parrots that fly around this place, bursts of chirruping colour that fly and flit about like tiny rainbows. Yet he can't help but notice the absence of more substantial land creatures. He records that the only quadrupeds in these parts are dogs. Cook also notices the birds, recording that there are plenty of wild fowl in these parts, such as shags, ducks, curlews, and crows. He also records of their time at Talago Bay. We saw no 4-footed animals, either tame or wild, or signs of any, except dogs and rats, and these were very scarce, especially the latter. The flesh of the former they eat, and ornament their clothing with their skins, as we do ours with furs. In terms of trading with the natives, Cook is insistent that his men behave well, for both the sake of decency and replenishment. I suffered everybody to purchase whatever they pleased without limitation, for by this means I knew that the natives would not only sell, but get a good price for everything they bought. This, I thought, would induce them to bring to the market whatever the country afforded, and I have great reason to think that they did. The captain and his men continue to sail east along the coast, the cartographers happily and constantly charting, chatting, and noting everything they see. Everything from small rocky islands to great towering cliffs and tiny inlets are recorded in exquisite detail. True, not a lot of creative time is spent on the naming exercise. It is simply a matter of ignoring whatever the local population might have called it for centuries and planting some kind of literary flag of the King's English upon these ancient landforms, and any will do. Reaching a northeast-facing cape, which Captain Cook believes is the coast's most easterly point, the Endeavour passes to its westward side, and Cook names it after Lieutenant Zachary Hicks, who was the first to spot it. Then Cape Runaway, so named for the natives there who flee from the Endeavour's cannon's thundering fourth grape shot, before dipping to the southwest into a bay that affords them not only safe anchorage, but will, for good reason, be named the Bay of Plenty. We saw, Cook notes, a great deal of cultivated land laid out in regular enclosures, a sure sign that the country is both fertile and well inhabited. Even more happily, the waters around abound with the fruits of the ocean, fat lobsters, mussels, succulent oysters, even eels, and the natives prove to be more than willing to trade in return for nails, beads, and cloth, a thrilling development for the crew, leading to sumptuous seafood feasts. When occasionally warlike parties do approach, Tupaia takes matters in hand, telling them that the power of the white man is not of their world. It is like nothing they've ever seen, and that is why he wants them to watch as a cannon is first fired, while they gaze to yonder trees. Timber! Do they really want to be on the wrong end of such power? They do not. Chapter 9. The Circumnavigation. The man who does no more than carry out his instructions will never get very far in discovery. Captain Cook, 1775. The southern continent having been seen on the west side by Tasman in 1642, and on the east by Juan Fernandez, above half a century before, and by others after him in different latitudes from 64 degrees to 40 degrees south, it is impossible for anyone at this time to discover it. Although the land has been seen and once visited, yet to open an intercourse with its inhabitants is a task still to be performed. Alexander Dalrymple, 1770. 3rd of November, 1769. Te Whanganui, Ahai, white sails in the Great Bay. From the shore of this land of Aotearoa, the Ngāti Hei tribe of this area, Whitianga, watch mesmerized. This spot is not their main base, just one of several spots they move to from time throughout the year, so as not to exhaust the natural food in one particular area, and also, as one among them would explain, so that our fire might be kept alight on each block, so that it might not be taken from us by some other tribe. Yes, they have travelled far in this land, and seen many things, but never have they seen anything like this enormous vessel with its billowing white sails, now drooping something with wings from one end that goes into the water with a splash, trailing a rope behind it. As ever, the younger ones look to their kaumatua, their elders. What is this? What is happening? The old men are firm. The vessel is Tupua, a god, and the people on board are strange beings. The latter is confirmed once small boats splash down by the Tupua ship and start to make their way to the shore. For look there, the people on board have their backs to us, but are making straight to the shore. Yes, it is so, say the old ones. These people are Tupua, goblins. Their eyes are at the back of their heads. They pull on shore with their backs to the land, to which they are going. Yes, these visitors are Tangata Tupua, goblin people, while the natives regard themselves as Tangata Maori, normal people. Once the goblins have landed, all of the women and children, including a very little boy by the name of Te Horata Te Tanefa, run into the forest, leaving the warriors alone to face them. "All hands bring ship to anchor," comes the master's cry. It is the afternoon of the 3rd of November, and the Endeavour is safely anchored in a fine inlet, albeit one as yet unnamed by white men. Cook hopes for a peaceful relationship with the natives, hardly desirous of any further conflict or disagreement. If they could just allow us to stay for a few days without interference, then this would be the perfect place to observe the transit of Mercury, soon to occur on the 9th of November. And on that note, what better name for the bay? It is 6 days before the transit even occurs, but by the time it takes place, Te Whanganui Ahai, the Great Bay of Hay, will have been rechristened as Mercury Bay. "If we be so fortunate as to obtain this observation," he records that night, "the longitude of this place and country will thereby be very accurately determined." Before long, however, and not for the first time, nor for the last time, the Endeavour finds itself positively swarmed by lesser watercraft. Natives in canoes abound, each of them speaking very civilly with Tupaia. Trade and talks take place at the typical pace and fashion until suddenly one of the jacks fires a shot. A few paces off, a bird drops dead in the water. Initially shocked but recovering quickly, a canoe of natives retrieves the dead bird and follow instructions by tying the bird to a fishing line that was towing astern, for which they were rewarded with a piece of cloth. The Endeavour and her men are happy for the peaceful presence of these natives, though perhaps they are too at ease around the white men. As Banks describes, the natives grew very saucy and lingered by the ship all night, singing their song of defiance and attempting to tow away the buoy of the anchor. The men on watch fire 3 musket shots, which only further riles the natives, who row off into the inky night, shouting promises of retribution when daylight returns. "We will return with more men and kill you all." "If you say so, but we will be ready." True to their word, the natives return at dawn, 150 men in 10 or 12 canoes, all armed with pikes, spears, and stones. After much conversation that oscillates wildly, one moment the natives are trading, the next the white men are firing musket balls through the canoe of a man trying to escape with purloined cloth, even while another, poor native, is getting sprayed with small shot. The Endeavour men establish such a superiority of arms that the natives go back ashore and remain, from this time, neither friends nor foes. They are a mercurial lot, these natives, and much to the white men's liking. They exhibit much fear whenever our boats approach them. The Endeavour plans to restock while anchored in this bay, eager to replenish their supplies for the days ahead, and the men cast their fishing nets wide in the shallows, alas, without success. In time, some of the braver natives paddle back out to the Endeavour, each canoe laden with the wealth of the sea, cockles, clams, mussels, and salty dried fish. There is more than enough for everyone on board, and the men are delighted. Banks, for one, is as happy as the clam he sups on. In the meantime, he and the good doctor are able to venture inland, up hill and down dale, to botanize and naturalize with, as Banks records, good success, which could not be doubted in a country so totally new. The hilltops around the bay are populated exclusively by a very large fern, curious for its silver undersurface, and the roots of which the natives had got together in large quantities, as they said, to carry away with them. Banks cuts away a sample from one of the ferns, filing it away for a closer inspection. "Ponga," he hears from behind him. "Ponga." One of the locals is gesturing towards the fern. "Ponga!" Well, that name might be fine for these natives, but it hardly follows scientific naming conventions, does it? The friendly native has succeeded in passing on the name for this plant, though the language barrier proves too great for him to explain the special place that this silver fern, this ponga, holds in native society, a symbol of strength, endurance, and power. In the meantime, Cook paces the shore, gazing at the sky and clouds above him. Here? No, here. Picking the best vantage point to observe the transit, as open as possible and yet with shelter, is an absolute imperative. Time must be taken to get everything right. Once he has selected the right spot, the captain gives the order, and the Endeavour is brought further into the bay, just off the southern tip, and a place that will soon take on the name Cook's Cove. And so the preparations continue. The men chop wood, build fires, collect wild foodstuffs, and even dig a fresh-water spring, with the help of Tupaia. The natives are quick to dub it Te Waikere a Tupaia, the well dug by Tupaia. Finally, on the 7th day, Cook orders the men to heel and scrub the ship. first moving all the ballast and cannon to one side of the ship's hold to savagely tilt it, exposing much of the hull to be scrubbed clean of mollusks and the like, before shifting it all to the other side and doing the same again. It is loathsome, tiring work, and a far cry from where they'd rather be. However, all is not terrible, as the natives happen that day to bring out a haul of freshly caught mackerel and offer it to the crew. Every man falls asleep that night with a bellyful of tasty white fish meat. Early November, Whitianga, gobbling goblins. But, as Te Horata Te Taniwha will later recount, as the goblins stayed some time and did not do any evil to our braves, we came back one by one and gazed at them, and we stroked their garments with our hands, and we were pleased with the whiteness of their skins and the blue eyes of some of them. As the goblins start to gather oysters, the natives give some kumara, fish and fern root to them, which they gratefully accept. And, as we saw that these goblins were eating kumara, fish and cockles, we were startled and said, perhaps they are not goblins like the Maori goblins. But what now? Some of the goblins go into the forest and start to climb the hill to the native pa, their fortified village, protected by trenches, ramparts and stockades, to gaze at the land and the ocean, and they even make drawings on white sheets. While there they collect grasses from the cliffs, and when they descend to the beach they keep knocking stones together, placing some in their bags along with shells and coral, observing the instructions from the Admiralty to carefully observe the nature of the soil, and in case you find any mines, minerals or valuable stones, you are to bring home specimens of each. It is mystifying. Why, the natives ask, are these acts done by these goblins? If it is grass and stone they want, so be it. And so the women and children are set to gathering stones and grass of all sorts to give to the goblins, to see what pleases them. Some of the stones they liked, and put them into their bags, the rest they threw away, and when we gave them the grass and branches of trees, they stood and talked to us, or they uttered the words of their language. Perhaps they were asking questions, and, as we did not know their language, we laughed, and these goblins also laughed, so we were pleased. The warriors and old men of our tribe sat in silence and gazed at these goblins. Then we went up the Whitianga River with them. But what now? The natives have noticed that the goblins have walking sticks with them which they carry over their shoulders, rather than use them as support on the ground, which seems strange. But stranger still is what happens when they get to the trees where the shags do their nesting. For now the goblins point their walking sticks at the birds, and a short time later thunder was heard to crash, and a flash of lightning was seen, and a shag fell from the trees. And we children were terrified, and fled, and rushed into the forest, and left the goblins all alone. They laughed and waved their hands to us, and in a short time the bravest of us went back to where the goblins were, and handled the bird, and saw that it was dead. But what had killed it? The old people are more suspicious now, and not at all sure what to make of the visitors, whether they can be friends or not. They walk back to the shore, and for the first time the goblins give them some of their own food. Some of this food was very hard, but it was sweet. Some of our old people said it was panga panga, from the land from which these goblins came. Inevitably, with more contact between the natives and the goblins, the less fear there is on both sides, and there is even a certain amount of friendliness. Those who have most contact with the goblins, which are those natives who have actually been on their massive canoe, are the most loquacious of all about the wondrous things they have seen. When they come on shore, Te Horata Te Taniwha will recount, they gave our people an account of what they had seen. This made many of us desirous to go and see the home of the goblins. I went with the others, but I was a very little fellow in those days, so some of us boys went in the company of the warriors. Wide-eyed, Te Horata Te Taniwha climbs the rope ladder that hangs down the side of the canoe and emerges on the deck proper, goggle-eyed at the many pathways meandering around the great canoe, the strange structures adorning the boat itself, and the tall logs planted in wood that have such a tangle of ropes coming from them. And yet, as fascinated as Te Horata Te Taniwha and the others are, it seems the goblins are even more entranced by the small lads, the first time they have ever seen children up close. As soon as the wee ones are sitting on the deck, the goblins come over and coo over them, stroking their hair and woven mats, while at the same time they made much gabbling noise in talking, which we thought was questions regarding our mats and the shark's teeth we wore on our ears, and the hei tiki we wore suspended on our chests, but as we could not understand them, we laughed, and they laughed also. In short order, there is an exchange of certain items of English clothing for native clothing. Ka pai, say the natives, meaning very fine. When the goblins repeat the words in their strange garbled way, the natives laugh, which makes the goblins laugh in turn.
This ends CD 10. CD 11.
9th of November, 1769, Mercury Bay, blood and gore. As Mercury approaches the rising sun, Captain Cook and Mr. Green, accompanied by Lieutenant Hicks, head ashore with their instruments. They are ready. The morning is bright and clear, the precursors of a successful observation. In their absence aboard the Endeavour, it all happens so quickly. 5 canoe loads of natives paddle out to the ship, carrying a fresh haul of mackerel for these strange white beings who collect shells, flowers, tree blossoms, and stones. In the absence of Captain Cook and Lieutenant Hicks, the commanding officer in charge is Lieutenant John Gore, who, far from staying removed from the fray, as befitting the man in command, engages in vigorous bartering with the natives. At one point, he comes to an agreement with one of the natives by the name of Otireunowe to exchange some of his own cloth for the warriors, and trustingly passes it down to him, at which point it seems Gore is betrayed, for instead of passing up his mat, Otireunowe and his companions immediately push away from the Endeavour and shake their paddles in triumph. Fooled you! Even as the natives furiously paddle away, they immediately began to sing their war song, as if to defy any revenge those on board might choose to take. Alas, the natives have defied the wrong goblin. For now, reaching for one of the muskets, Lieutenant Gore walks to the stern of the ship to get as close as possible, takes careful aim, and squeezes the trigger. There is a flash, a roar, a puff of smoke, and at a distance of 50 yards the thieving native sprouts a bloody red hole in his back. In an instant, all the other canoes race away from the Endeavour. As the canoe bearing Otireunowe arrives on the shore, 8 of the native men in it jump out, only to note that the thief sat still with his dog-skin mat and the garment of the white man under his feet. His companions call to him to come quickly. "Otireunowe! Otireunowe! Otireunowe!" Alas, Otireunowe does not answer. One of them went and shook him, and the thief fell back into the hold of the canoe, and blood was seen on his clothing and a hole in his back. Otireunowe is no more, his spirit diving into the underworld, the realm of his ancestors. Aboard the Endeavour there is immediate consternation. Really? It has come to this? What a severe punishment of a crime committed, Sidney Parkinson chronicles in his diary, the Quaker disgusted once more at the savagery of Lieutenant Gore's justice. In the forest, Banks and his entourage, accompanied by the usual gathering of natives, hear the gunfire. Soon after, a distressed native arrives, who imparts the devastating tidings. Otireunowe has been killed by one of the white men with his thunderstick. There is an immediate stirring among the natives, a mixture of grief, anger, and fear. As quickly as the procession of natives hounding Banks had come together, it now melts away. One moment they are chattering and nattering and carrying on, the next they are ghosts, fading back into the bush whence they came. In a little time, however, Banks records, they returned on their own accord and acknowledged that the dead man deserved his punishment. As it happens, the natives are far more forgiving than Captain Cook, who, with Mr. Green, has successfully observed the transit of Mercury, or Banks, who, as Banks notes, are appalled, thinking the natives' fate severe, knowing as we did that small shot would have had almost or quite as good an effect with little danger to his life, which, though forfeited to the laws of England, we could not but wish to spare if it could be done without subjecting ourselves to the derision and consequently to the attacks of these people, which we have now but learnt to fear, not least they should kill us, but least we should be reduced to the necessity of killing a number of them, which must be the case, should they ever in reality attack us. As for Cook, he can feel fury rising within. It is rare for Cook to lose his temper completely, particularly with officers, but in this case he is appalled at the wanton slaughter of a native over a mere trifle, and gives full vent to his rage, upbraiding Gore in front of gentlemen and officers alike. The arrogant American's burst of anger has threatened their entire discourse with the natives in these parts, and made it virtually impossible for Cook and his men to fulfil their charter from the Admiralty to cultivate a friendship and alliance with them. In response to Cook's anger, Lieutenant Gore comes perilously close to arguing with a senior officer, maintaining he was entirely justified in punishing the thief. Their dispute is loud enough that it is within earshot of other senior people on the Endeavour, with some of them thinking that there is more to Cook's anger than just the killing. It is everything about the American Gore that rankles. Cook was jealous of Gore, Solander will recount. Gore had a sort of separate command in the vessel, which gave him superintendence over all the transactions with the Indians. He made use of this sometimes to disobey Cook, and therefore they hate each other. Gore always blamed severity on the Indians, and yet, by a sudden emotion, shot the man who cheated. Such an unmitigated disaster. And yet James Cook is also cognizant of the need for official calm, and when he comes to his journal to record the events of that day, he writes in a totally dispassionate tone. I must own, Cook notes, with much more mildness than he had displayed with Lieutenant Gore in person, it did not meet with my approbation, because I thought the punishment a little too severe for the crime, and we had now been long enough acquainted with these people to know how to chastise trifling faults like this without taking away their lives. And yet, while Cook regains his equanimity quickly, the same cannot be said for the American. Profoundly shaken, Lieutenant Gore will neither forgive Captain Cook for so upbraiding him, nor get over the horror of having taken the life of a man, all by his burst of anger that he has always had trouble controlling. Dr. Solander notes that the American did not recover for 12 days of the shock it gave him. And yet, whatever the Ngāti think of Lieutenant Gore at the time, one small native boy, Te Horata Te Taniwha, and his friends have a great opinion of one of the white goblins who visit their shores. The memory of James Cook will stay with them for their whole lives and be remarkably passed on to posterity. There was one supreme man in that ship, Te Horata Te Taniwha will recount many years later. We knew that he was the lord of the whole by his perfect gentlemanly and noble demeanour. He seldom spoke, but some of the goblins spoke much. But this man did not utter many words. All he did was to handle our mats and hold our mere, spears, and wahayaka, and touch the hair of our heads. He was a very good man, and came to us, the children, and patted our cheeks and gently touched our heads. Perhaps it is because he misses his own children, James, Nathaniel, and precious little Elizabeth, who James Cook reflects must be 6, 5, and 2 years old now. They, too, must be about this size, or perhaps even a bit bigger. He misses them, their innocent looks, their tender love, their simple worlds, a far cry from their fathers, but he will be home with them soon enough. And of course dear Elizabeth had been pregnant when he had left, so that little one must be a year old now. Oh, how he aches to see them all again, and to meet his new child. What few words he says to the children have a curious hissing sound, and the words he spoke were not understood by us in the least. In any case, his attention has now turned to the warriors, as he clearly wants some information from them. The speech the lord of these goblins makes to these warriors is translated by the one among them who speaks the native language. Taking a piece of charcoal, Cook makes a wavy line on the deck of the ship before pointing to the nearby shore, and then looking meaningfully at the warriors. It is one of the old native chiefs who divines his meaning first. "He is asking for an outline of this land," he says. Well, the answer to that is very easy, and that old man himself takes the proffered charcoal and draws the outline they all know of the land, including all the bays, inlets, rivers, cliffs, and rocky outcrops. With Tupaia translating, the old chief explains to the chief goblin, the best he can, the meaning of all the marks that go beyond just the contours of the shoreline, while everyone else on deck watches them closely, listening. After some time, the chief goblin took some white stuff on which he made a copy of what the old chief had made on the deck, and then spoke to the old chief. Te Horata Te Taniwha takes it all in, still stunned at everything he is seeing and hearing. "I and my 2 boy companions did not walk about on board of the ship. We were afraid lest we should be bewitched by the goblins, and we sat still and looked at everything we saw at the home of these goblins. And now here is the chief goblin again, coming their way. As before, he smiles and ruffles the hair of the boy and his 2 young friends. They are gentle children. He then proffers his hand to Te Horata Te Taniwha, offering special nails that he has brought as a gift. Te Horata Te Taniwha's companions aren't so sure, afraid to take these strange trinkets. But when Te Horata laughs, the chief goblin gives the nail to him. "Kapai," the young fellow says in response, meaning fine. "Kapai," the chief goblin repeats slowly, before again affectionately patting their heads with his hand and then going away. "This is the leader of the ship," the other 2 boys say to Te Horata Te Taniwha, "which is proved by his kindness to us. And also, he is so very fond of children, a noble man, one of noble birth, cannot be lost in a crowd. Te Horata Te Taniwha will treasure the nail like a goblin might treasure a gold ring, the most precious thing he owns." The Endeavour continues its journey, first tracking northwest, then following the coastline to the northeast, Captain Cook penciling its contours and geographical quirks into his chart each night, and soon noting another quirky though familiar contour in parts where they are not so warmly welcomed, and of parts that are certainly warm, but rarely welcomed up close. For sometimes, when they are passing close enough to the coast to observe the natives, he can see them lined up on cliffs with their backs to them, only to bend over and bare their buttocks. Te Kōtere o Te Whenua, the anus of the land, indeed. Look, if the exact meaning is unclear, certainly the sentiment is unmistakable. 21st of November, 1769. Tupaia lectures, Cook learns. While Lieutenant Gore remains shell-shocked by the captain's public dressing down, Tupaia is blooming before the captain's eyes, a revered figure wherever they go. Wherever they drop anchor, the natives who approach ask for Tupaia by name, and either seek his help with trade, or at least his help translating their threats. That news of the Endeavour's visit can travel so far, so fast across such distance is evidence of cooperation and communication between a cornucopia of various tribes and peoples scattered across the land. To the white men, it is another foreign land, full of strange sounds, smells, and sights. To Tupaia, it is strange as well, though not unlike Tahiti and her own necklace of islands. He is now a man of many worlds, at one with and apart from the white men, the New Zealand natives, and his Tahitian homeland, which is no small thing as he continues to pine for his homeland and count the moons until they can get back to Britain, and soon afterwards, he hopes, begin his journey home once more. And so, he is constantly busy. On the 18th of November, when they drop anchor just outside the Firth of Thames, or so the white men will come to call it, they have only just finished naming it, when some of its traditional inhabitants arrive. "Come ashore, and we will kill you all," shouts one native, being very saucy indeed. "Well," replies Tupaia evenly, "while we are at sea, you have no manner of business with us. The sea is our property as much as yours." Banks, whose own grasp of the language has improved enough that he can follow and record the exchange, is stunned. Such reasoning from an Indian, who had not had the smallest hint from any of us, surprised me much, and, the more as these were sentiments I never had before heard him give a hint about in his own case. Yes, bit by bit, both Mr. Banks and Captain Cook are lifting their estimation of Tupaia's capacities, and with it the abilities of his whole race. No, not the equal of white men, they are sure, but still, they really can use deductive logic, and have an instinctive grasp of even such sophisticated concepts as that of sovereignty. In his journal, Banks is clear that these people have a larger share of ingenuity that usually falls to the lot of nations who have had so little or indeed no commerce with any others appears at first sight. Their boats, the better sort of them at least, show it most evidently. To Banks' own surprise, he even finds himself admiring their art, a field in which he had initially thought that Europeans were the last word. For the beauty of their carving in general, I fain would say something more about it, but find myself much inferior to the task. Sidney Parkinson is equally impressed, and also fascinated by their use of spirals. The men have a particular taste for carving. Their paddles, boards to put on their hoses, tops of walking sticks, and even their boats are carved in a variety of flourishes, turnings, and windings that are unbroken. But their favourite figure seems to be a volute or spiral, which they vary many ways, single, double, and triple, and with as much truth as if done from mathematical drafts. Yet the only instruments we have seen are a chisel and an axe made of stone. Their fancy indeed is very wild and extravagant. Yet it is more than the artistic talent of the native carvers that impress the men. It is their more practical endeavours, what they use these beautifully carved canoes for, that so fascinates the men. Fishing? Nets for fishing they make in the same manner as ours, Banks records, of an amazing size. Besides this, they have fish pots and baskets worked with twigs, and another kind of net which they most generally make use of that I have never seen in any country but this. They are circular and about 7 or 8 feet in diameter, and 2 or 3 feet deep. They are stretched by 2 or 3 hoops, and open at the top for near but not quite their whole extent. On the bottom is fastened the bait, a little basket containing the guts, etc., of fish and sea ears which are tied to different parts of the net. This is let down to the bottom where fish are, and when enough are supposed to be gathered together, are drawn up with a very gentle motion, by which means the fish are insensibly lifted from the bottom. In this manner I have seen them take vast numbers of fish, and indeed it is a most general way of fishing all over the coast. More than ever now, both Cook and Banks are glad that they have Tupaia with them to not only translate words but also interpret native actions, so they can better understand them. Looking at the trees that grow in these parts, Cook is also stunned. Their straightness, their height. Taking his quadrant, he carefully measures the height of one with his usual precision. I found its length from the root to the first branch to be 89 feet. It was as straight as an arrow, and tapered but very little in proportion to its length. so that I judged that there was 356 solid feet of timber in this tree. Banks is similarly impressed, most particularly noting, like Cook, the lack of taper. I dare venture to affirm that the top where the lowest branch took its rise was not a foot less in diameter than where we measured, which was about 8 feet from the ground. We cut down a young one of these trees. The wood proved heavy and solid, too much so for mast, but would make the finest plank in the world. There is no doubt about it, this New Zealand is a place filled with resources that would have enormous value back in Europe. 26th of November, 1769, Cape Brett, North Island, once more into his breach. "They have heard of us," Tupaia tells Captain Cook, as they both peer over the gunwale at the 7 canoes carrying some 200-odd natives in the small open bay where they are anchored. Word of the goblins' largesse and gullibility has preceded them yet again. Thankfully, the natives of the area are eager traders, happily brandishing their offerings, fish and oysters, not clubs, spears, or menacing tongues. They do bear their buttocks, though, not with any aim to offend, and each cheek, down to a man, is marked with a black spiral. Many have their thighs almost entirely black, small lines only being left untouched so that they look like striped breeches. And so the bartering begins. My fish for your knife? No. The Jacks have been enjoying their fishing rods, hauling in loads by the pail. What type of fish is it? Well, frankly, the lads are really fishing for fun of it, but now that you ask, Mr. Banks, sea bream they are. Yes, sir, that's what Tupaia told us. Banks makes a note of it as the sailors continue to cast their lines into the water, catching so many fish that they no longer need to rely on the natives for them. Cook takes notice as well, and always on the lookout for the impetus for a good name, decides that the cove will be called Brim Bay from this day forth. Perhaps then my whale rib for your old pair of black breeches. Yes, everything goes well enough, and the journey continues unabated over the next 2 days, notwithstanding a few warning shots towards some pesky natives, until they find themselves once again trading with a litter of canoes. Yes, here you are, I'll give you this if you give me— Oh, this old trick. It's not the first time that a native has taken his half of the trade without providing something in return, and the crew have become familiar with it. Familiar, but no less infuriated. On this occasion, the midshipman gathers the nearest weapon at hand, a fishing line with a cruel hook on the end, and heaves the lead at the retreating native thief. A bite. Well, not quite a bite, but that is what it feels like to the recalcitrant native, as the hook really does bite deep into his backside, right in the eye of his spiral tattoo, when the midshipman yanks on the line with all his might. That is for all your brothers who have been showing their bottoms to us. The midshipman keeps pulling with all his might, the native yelping in agony, until the shank breaks, leaving the bend and pointed barb implanted in the native's bottom. And that's one in the brown eye for you. No very agreeable legacy, Mr. Banks notes wryly as the Endeavour crew fall about laughing. The natives are considerably less amused, and yet, while it is no doubt a terrible pain in the posterior for the thief, it is so much better than the trigger-happy gun-toting American Lieutenant Gore shooting you dead. The encounter, however, appears to have poisoned relations, and the next day the natives reappear, under the guise of trade, only to start hurling stones at all those on the Endeavour, with more courage than any boats we had seen. Captain Cook will suffer it no longer. He climbs up to the poop deck, a shiny white beacon for the rock-hurling natives, who soon send a barrage his way. Captain Cook draws his musket, loaded with small shot. He aims it at one of the natives who is poised to throw a stone and pulls the trigger. A second later the native is thrown back into his canoe, and as Banks records, he sunk down so immediately into the canoe that we suspected he was materially hurt. Does this stop the rest of them? It does not. Another Wakatawa, war canoe filled with many natives, all clearly about to throw stones, sallies forth. Captain Cook allows them to get within a range of 50 yards, calculated to be that distance whereby they can't hurt him with stones, but he can hurt them with small shot, and again fires, whereupon they quickly retreat. It is becoming ever more apparent, and worryingly so, that these New Zealand natives will not be as pliant as the tractable Tahitians had been. Even when outnumbered and outgunned, they are warriors by nature and won't surrender without a fight. On occasion they might relent and retreat, but only as a means to regroup and fight again. Sailing deeper into the Bay of Islands, Cook writes, "I was obliged to pepper 2 or 3 fellows with small shot, after which they retired, and the wind coming at northwest we stood off to sea." Firing his musket at natives does not come easily to him, as it does to Lieutenant Gore, but sometimes it simply has to be done. 29th of November, 1769, Bay of Islands, cannon to the left of them, celery to the right of them. Natives! A handful of curious sailors of the Endeavour have only just landed on the beach when they realise the mass of bold natives who had been floating about the ship moments earlier have followed them to shore and are about to land on them, running across the sands with frightening speed while brandishing weapons as fearsome as their faces. A squalling, skirmishing scrum of Englishmen and Maori takes place. The result? The Englishmen give ground and are bloodily beaten back into the sea. Instead of the shore, they have come up with a new destination, wherever these ferocious natives aren't. Unfortunately, they neglect to report their brief battle to Captain Cook, who, in the company of some marines and the ever-botanising Banks, is even now approaching this same landing spot in the yawl. It is thus, no sooner than the bow of their boat hits the shore, about 3/4 of a mile from where the ship lies, than they see natives coming at them in canoes, even as others come rushing along the beach. Still others, as Banks describes, appeared on the tops of the hills and numbers from behind each head of the cove, so that we were in a moment surrounded by 200 of them. Cook is born for this moment. A man given to drama would act dramatically and dangerously, but it is not in his steady-as-she-goes, if-you-please nature, which is precisely what is required. He motions for Mr. Banks to follow him, and strides confidently towards the bulk of the natives on the beach. The natives jostle to get a look at the white men coming towards them, each with his spear lifted, and yet for the moment their curiosity seems to quell their truculence, and no one moves to strike. Just what manner of beings are these who show no fear, though completely outnumbered by heavily armed warriors? Captain Cook waves at the natives, beckoning them to follow him back to the major party of sailors and marines. They do so, walking at a wary distance behind the 2 white emissaries and stopping well short of the main group, watching as some of the white goblins come forward and draw a line in the sand with their strange sticks and make clear to the natives they are not to pass over it. Stunned, the natives appear to agree, before another group of natives comes from the other end of the beach, and, with no such line, are soon mingling with the white men when a cry rings out, immediately taken up and repeated by other baleful voices, as they all go into a crouch. Captain Cook and his men watch warily, but make no move until 3 natives suddenly break from the pack, wade into the shallow waters, and try to drag the pinnace and the yawl onto the beach. With things turning dramatic, it is time to take dramatic action. Captain Cook snaps the orders, and those whose muskets are loaded with small shot fire in the natives' direction, which for the moment succeeds in driving them back. But wait. One native, braver than the rest, attempts to rally his friends and makes great charges forward, waving his patu club. It is the doctor, whose gun is still loaded with small shot, for he had declined to fire in the first volley, who must do the honours. It is a strange thing for a man of bookish bent to find himself on the other side of the world pointing a loaded gun at a human being, but he feels he has no choice. When the brave man is just 20 yards from them, he fires, and on the instant the man, with specks of blood suddenly appearing all over his torso, stops, turns and runs, retreating with the rest to higher ground, where they regroup, preparing for another sally. Something stronger is called for, and, aboard the Endeavour, where the confrontation is being watched very closely by Lieutenants Hicks and Gore through their spyglasses, they have just the thing. Hicks gives the order to prepare for fire. 5 of the cannon are primed, loaded, and await only the signal from Lieutenant Hicks, who now lifts his sword in readiness. Hicks drops his sword. Fire! For the natives on the hill it is extraordinary. One moment they are preparing to charge down upon the white devils, and the next the tops of the magnificent Kanuka trees behind them are entirely shattered, as trunks split and branches come tumbling down just before bursts of thunder roll over them on this clear day. The natives look behind them as the trees fall. If this is what the goblins can do to trees, what might they be able to do to us if we continue our attack? White man, black magic. It is too strong for them. They decide to retreat after all. They went off, Banks records, and at last left us our cove quite to ourselves, so that the muskets were laid down upon the ground, and all hands employed in gathering celery. 9th of December, 1769, off Rangaunu Bay, Tupaia tricks the truth. As happens so often, on this morning the bay floods with canoes. Yet this time the greetings of the natives are hesitant at best, and maybe even fearful. They are clearly reluctant to stray too near, for yes, the word has spread along the forest pathways, and by canoes across the bay. These visitors have great black tubes on their vessel that can unleash the power to fell a tree, as far as you could throw a spear 40 times, and blow as many warriors apart with a single blow if it just hit him once. The apprehension that might otherwise have developed into a delicate stalemate is quickly dissolved, thanks to Tupaia convincing the natives that no, don't worry, there is nothing to fear from these white men. In short order, the natives row beneath the stern, and begin to trade cloth and fish. Now, amid the cacophony of tongues and trades, Tupaia begins to delve into the history of these islanders, desperate for information that could help their journey. "Do you know of any countries besides this, or even been to any?" he asks. "No," the natives reply, before pointing to the northwest, "but our ancestors have talked of a large country in that direction to which some people had sailed in a very large canoe, which passage took them up to a month. From this expedition a part only returned, who told our countrymen that they had seen a country where the people eat hogs, for which animal they used the same name bua, as is used in the islands." "And have you no hogs among you?" asks Tupaia. "No," comes the firm reply. "And did your ancestors bring none back with them?" inquires Tupaia once more. "No." "You must be a parcel of liars," barks Tupaia. "Your story is a great lie, for your ancestors would never have been such fools as to come back without them." Either way, both Captain Cook and Banks are convinced these New Zealanders must be great sailors and navigators to have come this far, even if their skills transporting hogs is not up to the high mark set by Tupaia and his people. With the assistance of Master Molyneux and his mates, Captain Cook sets out to survey this new bay, finding it to all appearance nothing but white sand, thrown up in low irregular hills, lying in narrow ridges parallel with the shore. Seeing nothing more significant than the endless empty white of the beach, Cook names it Sandy Bay, and moves to the more important task of divining just where this bay lies in relation to the world around it. While it is Banks who has come this far to look at plants, Cook is no stranger to turning to flora for further information. Tracing the lay of the land with his eyes and resting on the greenery he can see in the distance, Cook notices the first ridge behind the sea beach is partly covered with shrubs, plants, etc., but the second ridge hath hardly any green thing upon it, which induced me to think that it lies open to the western sea. Who needs a botanist? Days later, Captain Cook's calculations prove correct when they see there on the horizon the northernmost point of visible land. Being both in the north and a cape, the captain dubs it North Cape and records its location to be in the latitude of 34 degrees 22 minutes south and longitude 186 degrees 55 minutes west from Greenwich. Saw land bearing southwest, being the same northwesternmost land we have seen before, he records in the log, and which I take to be the northern extremity of this country, as we have now a large swell rolling in from the westward, which could not well be, was we covered by any land on that point of the compass. It is further evidence that the great southern land does not exist at all, but it puts the sailors on their guard, as sails rip and the men work around the clock to manoeuvre the Endeavour southward. For the next fortnight or so, the Endeavour battles a strong easterly current, mercurial winds off North Cape finally falling in with what appears to be New Zealand's northwestern shore on the 23rd of December, and following it southeast. On Christmas Eve, Banks shoots some geese. One notable tradition thus is observed, even though at the other end of the earth. As it was the humour of the ship to keep Christmas in the old-fashioned way, Joseph Banks notes, it was resolved of them to make a goose pie for tomorrow's dinner. And so it is done. Gone the sun. Christmas Day. Our goose pie was eaten with great approbation, and in the evening all hands were as drunk as our forefathers used to be upon the like occasion. In fact, so much did they drink that on the following day an even more established, if not so cherished, tradition is observed. This morn all heads ached with yesterday's debauch. All heads, in fact, except that of the moderate Captain Cook, who on this day recognises a small island to the northwest of their position, which he takes to be the Three Kings discovered by Tasman. They are on the same stretch of coast, charted by Abel Tasman. Onward they sail, fighting stiff onshore winds and roiling seas such as they did not encounter on the eastern side of the Cape, the jacks forever striking, repairing and replacing their sails, attempting to stand in to shore when the weather calms, but mostly standing at least 3 leagues out to sea, and pushing southward as much as conditions allow. As the sands of the hourglass start to drift, and even tremble, as a new decade begins to tumble over, a slow battle is taking place aboard the Endeavour, no less than a battle for a continent. Or at least it is a battle over whether New Zealand is but an island, or a solitary series of islands, or the beginning of the great southern continent. The further they go, the more Cook is convinced that New Zealand is an island, or a series of islands, and is intent on proving this beyond all doubt by circumnavigating it. Banks, on the other hand, and he has the unanimous support of his own party and a fair measure of the crew, is convinced that New Zealand is but the start of the great southern land, and this dip south is but temporary. Either way, the fact that Cook is now pushing his mighty Whitby cat to prowl further means that they will soon have the answer, in the form of the map that continues to form under Cook's precise hand, even as Banks shoots birds, hooks fishes, gathers plants when they go ashore, and continues to expand his now groaning catalogue. While each is content for the other to focus on his own field of duties, Banks does have a growing frustration at just how careful Cook is with his mapping, as it means the Endeavour must move so slowly. Still, just as ugliness begets distemper, so too doth beauty soothe souls, and both men continue to be impressed by the sheer natural wonder of everything they are seeing from sunrise to sunset every blessed day. This is clearly a land that is strikingly pretty, green and fertile, from east to west and north to south. From the deck they can see snow-capped mountains, white beaches, green bushes and luscious fields, all boasting a lyrical loveliness that is completely bewitching. 14th of January, 1770. Entering Cook's Strait, a full-bodied meal. No less than 400 miles down the west side of New Zealand, The same stretch sailed and roughly charted 128 years ago by the Dutchman Abel Tasman, exploration too close to shore remains dangerous. The coast continues trending southerly, but to what end? The question is answered soon enough. For on this day Captain Cook sees two things of great significance. The first is land to their south, and the second thing, to their east, the wide opening of what he supposes is a large bay, or perhaps it is what Tasman marked on his chart as Zeehan's Bight. Bight or bay, the inlet seems to call to them like a siren song, beckoning them into her calm waters. The following morning, after they have proceeded a little further into it, they can see more clearly. Cook notes in his log that rather than a bight or a bay, a seafarer's cul-de-sac, this broad opening has a strong current pushing to the east, strongly suggesting it is a strait, and that there is an outlet at the other end. Proceeding further into the broad inlet to confirm it, the opening narrows as they go, though the current becomes still stronger as they note a complex series of bays, coves, and points on the land that appears to their south. If this is a strait they are in, this southern shore is perhaps of another large island? The shore, Cook notes in an upbeat mood, seems to form several bays, into one of which I intend to go with the ship, in order to careen her, she being very foul, and to repair some few defects, recruit our stock, wood, water, etc. Despite the danger, the Endeavour's venture into these waters is greeted by a friendly, if unfamiliar, face. Surfacing from the water from time to time with black saucer eyes, long grey whiskers, and smelling a lot like fish, is a male sea lion. Resplendent and regal with a shaggy mane, the lion seems pleased with the visitors to his realm, keeping a watchful but friendly eye on the Endeavour. He is the king of these parts, but not a despot, and they are welcome. Others of the locals feel differently, however, as, some 8 miles in, the men spot a canoe full of natives, crossing a small bay, but keeping a wide berth from the white men. The natives on the canoe disembark on the beach of a small island before they climb up to a small dwelling on its highest point. If only all their interactions with the locals could be as agreeable as with the sea lion. On the 16th of January, Cook finds a wide and bountiful inlet, and soon a cove in which to anchor after several weeks under constant sail. From their anchorage, in what Cook describes as a very snug cove, they look out upon a fertile landscape, well forested and well watered for the purposes of refilling a ship. The jacks are aching for the stability of shore after weeks of hard travelling and violent waters. What they most want are fresh fish, and their wish is granted shortly after the seine is hauled. Better than a land of milk and honey, this is a land of fish, and hundreds of pounds of them are procured in an instant. And yet, even in a place of such moving beauty, they come across the strangest of things, well beyond anything in their previous experience. After dinner one evening, they decide to go for a pleasant row in the yawl, to land on a nearby cove and stretch their legs, when they come across— what is this floating on the water? A dead seal? No, a dead woman, and so bloated and rotted is her body it is clear she's been dead for some time. Shocked, they arrive on shore to find a small family of natives, so afraid they initially run up the beach and take shelter in the woods, but who return to tell Tupaia that the woman was a relation of ours, and that instead of burying our dead, our custom is to tie a stone to them and throw them into the sea. Clearly, Banks surmises the stone must have been unloosed by some accident. Very well then, the morbid mystery has been solved. With great hospitality, the family welcome Cook and Banks to dine with them, eager to share a roast meal. Roast dog, which is already cooking deep in the ground. The Englishmen are famished, and are much obliged. Banks, curious as always, snatches a quick glance in their many provision baskets, as so by accident observed 2 bones, pretty clean picked, which as appeared upon examination were undoubtedly human bones. Good God. Sharp as can be, Occam's razor tells Banks what this must mean, but still he cannot quite fathom what he is seeing and the implications. Reeling from his revelation, he is only just able to maintain his mask of steely indifference. His stomach lurches as his eyes dart to this otherwise friendly family who are hosting them. This family are cannibals? And are we visitors possibly intended to be the next meal? Must we be on our guard for an attack? Horror after grisly thought keep whirling around as Banks feels decidedly ill. It is one thing to hear tales of it, to imagine a religious rite of solemnity. It is quite another to see bodies in a basket as a family sits calmly readying its evening meal. Though we had from the very first of our arrival upon the coast constantly heard the Indians acknowledge the custom of eating their enemies, we had never before had a proof of it, but this amounted almost to demonstration. The bones were clearly human. Upon them were evident marks of their having been dressed on the fire. The meat was not entirely picked off from them, and on the grisly ends, which were gnawed, were evident marks of teeth. With Tupaia translating, the Englishman wants to know more. "What bones are these?" Banks begins carefully. "The bones of a man," they reply, perhaps a little bemused at his interest. "And have you eaten the flesh?" "Yes." "Have you none of it left?" "No." "Why did not you eat the woman we saw today in the water?" inquires Banks, morbidly interested now. "She was our relation," comes the answer. Apparently one must draw the line somewhere. "Who then is it that you do eat?" Banks continues. "Those who are killed in war." "In war? And who was the man whose bones these are?" Again, by Banks's detailed account, the reply comes, 5 days ago a boat of our enemies came into this bay, and of them we killed 7, of whom the owner of these bones was one." The natives seem extraordinarily matter-of-fact about what appears to be an ancient custom, but the English sailors cannot help themselves. The horror that appeared in the countenances of the seamen on hearing this discourse, which was immediately translated for the good of the company, Banks chronicles, is better conceived than described. When it comes to Banks, however, his fascination to be able to document such an extraordinary practice helps him overcome his horror, at least to the point that he can dissemble it enough that the natives will continue to talk openly to him. While quietly stunned, the social scientist in him is pleased at having so strong a proof of a custom which human nature holds in too great abhorrence to give easy credit to. Captain Cook is every bit as confronted. "It is hard to account for what we have everywhere been told, of their eating their enemies killed in battle," he writes, "which they most certainly do. Circumstances enough we have seen to convince us of the truth of this. Tupaia, who holds this custom in great aversion, has very often argued with them against it, but they have always as strenuously supported it, and never would own that it was wrong." Tupaia is horrified, but eager to question the natives about their carnivorous practices. He has seen so much, more than most men, native or otherwise, and yet still he cannot bring himself to believe that the natives can eat each other. "But where are the skulls?" Tupaia asks the old man. "Do you eat them?" "Bring them, and we shall then be convinced that these are men, whose bones we have seen." "We do not eat the heads," answers the old warrior, Topa, paramount chief of these, the Motuara people, "but we do the brains, and tomorrow I will bring you one and show you." Very well, then. 20th of January, 1770. Queen Charlotte's Sound. Banks gets ahead. Not for nothing will the crew informally christen this place as Cannibal Bay. As good as his word, a couple of days later, the old man is back, bringing with him 4 severed heads. One is the head of a lad, about 14 or 15 years of age, and evidently showed by the contusions on one side of it that it had received many violent blows, which had chipped off a part of the skull. They are, Banks records, preserved with the flesh and hair on, and kept, I suppose, as trophies, as possibly scalps were by the North Americans before the Europeans came among them. The brains were, however, taken out, as we had been told. Maybe they are a delicacy here. The flesh and skin upon these heads were soft, but they were somehow preserved so as not to stink at all. While Captain Cook looks on, quietly appalled, Joseph Banks proceeds at once to try to make a trade for that particular head, offering in exchange a pair of splendid, albeit slightly used, pair of linen drawers he happens to have with him. The old man, though taken with the drawers, remains reluctant to part with his head, until Joseph Banks pulls out his musket, points it towards the other man, and the deal is done. To clear their own heads, Mr. Banks and the doctor head off on another excursion, tramping through the mostly thick undergrowth. They are interested to note the topography of the land is so hilly that there is barely enough of a flat patch to host a potato garden, even if they'd wanted to tend one. Our friends here, Banks notes, do not seem to feel the want of such places, as we have not yet seen the least appearance of cultivation. I suppose they live entirely upon fish, dogs, and enemies. The horrors and mysteries of Cannibal Bay, now a secondary concern, Captain Cook's mind turns to pressing matters. The Endeavour is anchored 20 miles from the head of the inlet, but the captain's goal is to formulate a plan from which to proceed. He must now discover an elevated vantage point from where he can map the way forward. 23rd of January, 1770. Queen Charlotte's Sound. Sea seen. Passage proclaimed. Captain Cook, Joseph Banks, and the doctor climb the nearest hill. No easy thing given how heavily wooded it is. At the summit they pause to survey the inlet, and realize the way forward will not be so easy. They are hindered by higher hills in the way, followed by impenetrable woods that make further advancement impossible. And yet, what is that to the east? Turning his head further in that billowing wind nearly always found at the top of such hills, Captain Cook sees sea, the wide open blue stretching out unbroken from here on the hill to the horizon. It is wonderful news, though not yet confirmed, that there will be passage through possible reefs and shallows to get there. So, on the last day of January 1770, Cook tries again, climbing to the peak of the highest hill in the whole area, where the view is unencumbered. And there it is. To the east, he can see the full glorious passage. Cook is quick to descend, eager to raise the anchor, put to sea, and get through. Clearly now, what lies to their north is no more than a small island, and not the great southern land. Cook won't dare state it as a certainty yet, but privately his thoughts are clear. I add some conjectures that the lands to the southwest of this strait, which we are now at, was an island, and not a continent. Attempting to ignore the rather disconcerting 4 human skulls an old native man had brought aboard, their empty eye sockets seemed to stare accusingly, Cook buries his disgust for the macabre trophies and asks, "Is there a strait or a passage into the eastern sea?" "Yes, there is a passage." Before Cook leaves this land, he wishes to claim it for King George, and erect wooden markers should any Frenchman or Spaniard follow with similar imperial ideas. With that in mind, Captain Cook, Surgeon Monkhouse, and Tupaia travelled to speak to native chiefs on a nearby island to advertise their intent to put up these posts with, by his account, a happy result. They not only gave their free consent to set it up, but promised never to pull it down. The English captain confers with the chief of the Motuara people, Topar. While they are setting up the post, Cook questions the old man about the lands to the southwest. Topar tells him of the South Island, on which they stand, Te Waiponamu, the water of the greenstone, which would take up a great many moons to sail round. Lost in translation for the moment is how these lands were actually formed. As all the tribes know, as it had been handed down through the generations, told around the fires and intoned in the sacred places, the South Island is the Tawaka a Maui, the canoe of Maui, and the North Island is Taika a Maui, the fish of Maui. The demigod, Maui, stood upon the canoe to haul up the fish, and so Aotearoa was formed. As always, gifts are in order. The free exchange of rare and obscure items, a well-proven path towards peace. Cook offers 3 penny pieces dated 1763 and spike nails with the king's broad arrow cut deep in them. Safe passage essentially bought and paid for, Cook orders his men to take a post to the highest point of the island, where the Union Jack is to be hoisted. An entire island for nought but pennies and nails. I dignified this inlet with the name of Queen Charlotte's Sound, and took formal possession of it and adjacent lands in the name and for the use of His Majesty. With both the literary and actual flag of the British now firmly planted in the name of King George upon this new territory, Captain Cook and his men toast His Majesty's health with a bottle of wine. Eager to include the natives in their celebration, Cook's officers offer the bottle to Topa, though not before having drained it of every last drop of wine. A message in a bottle, if ever there was one. 3rd of February 1770, Queen Charlotte's Sound, Sod's Law. Surgeon Monkhouse is ropeable. The natives, he advises Joseph Banks, are given to the detestable vice of sodomy. Do tell. Yes, Monkhouse recounts between sniffs of snuff he had been with a family of natives, and paid a price for leave to make my addresses to any one young woman they should pitch upon for me. One was chose, and I willingly retired with her, but on examination she proved to be a boy. On returning and complaining of this, another was sent, who turned out to be a boy likewise. On my second complaint I could get no redress, but was laughed at by the Indians. As it turns out, not just the natives. For in truth Banks is highly amused himself, as, with barely muted glee, and the quick flick of his sharpened quill, he once again consigns the passions of Surgeon Monkhouse to where they belong, in the doghouse. Far be it from me to attempt saying that vice is not practised here, he notes in his journal. However, I must say that in my humble opinion this story proves no more than that our gentleman was fairly tricked out of his cloth, which none of the young ladies chose to accept on his terms, and the master of the family did not choose to part with. In any case, it is time to weigh anchor, and they are soon under way once more, when just 20 miles from the eastern entrance of Queen Charlotte's Sound, as they are attempting to sail the rest of the strait that bears southeast, the ripping tide suddenly carries them towards an outcrop of perilously rocky islands, too quick for the men to change course. A great roar begins to rise. Suddenly Cook and his crew are among the breakers. "It made a very great ripping," Sidney Parkinson records, "especially near the islands, where the water running in heaps, bears and whirlpools, made a very great noise in its passage." With no other options, Captain Cook barks his commands, and the Endeavour quickly drops anchor amidst the breakers, the heavy iron crashing down through the white sea foam. The sailors watch as the coils of heavy cable on the deck continue to unfurl with a metallic whir, and snake up and over the side, and ever downward into the depths for what feels like an age, as they get ever closer to hitting the rocks. At last, however, after full 150 fathoms of cable have unfurled, the anchor hits bottom, the cable is pulled tight, and the Endeavour holds. They are within spitting distance of the rocks. It is a near thing, but so long as the anchor holds steady, they will be safe, and the Endeavour will make it through the night. The dawn brings an ebbing tide, and Cook is more than happy to follow it through the strait. 8th of February, 1770. Leaving the strait and narrow, an eye for an island, by to a continent. After the Endeavour finally sails clear of, Cook's Strait, they turn north to sail up the eastern side of New Zealand's northern island to finally put to bed any ongoing speculation aboard that the land may extend southeast between Cape Turnagain and Cape Palliser, leading to the great southern continent. Yes, I'm gazing intently at you, Lieutenant Gore, as I have heard your loud speculations on this matter. Of course, Captain Cook personally has no doubt, but is still resolved to clear up every doubt that might arise on so important an object. The next morning they sight Cape Turnagain, and prepare to turn again. The circumnavigation of what Captain Cook has discovered to be the northern island of New Zealand is complete, and Cook formally calls the officers up on deck to officially ask them, particularly you, Lieutenant Gore, if they are now satisfied that further exploration is not required in this direction. They answered in the affirmative, he chronicles, and we hauled our wind to the eastward. Within minutes they have fully turned and are heading south to explore the coastline of New Zealand's southern landmass. It never ends. James Cook is almost certain he is on his way to proving that there is no great southern land. There is a New Zealand made of 2 islands. But for some on board, the dream never dies. Joseph Banks is one of these, and he reports the fresh news with excitement in his journal. In the morn early, Mr. Gore imagined he saw land, to the southeastward. Imagined is precisely right in the opinion of Captain Cook. The matter is settled by science, by maps, not by the imaginings of lieutenants. There can be no land mass in that direction. You must have been mistaken, Lieutenant Gore. Gore bristles at the correction, nay, the rebuke. He has sailed in the South Pacific before. He is no gentleman dandy. He is an officer. Lieutenant Gore knows why Cook does not believe him. He is jealous. Jealous of Gore's command of the men. Jealous of his ability to speak the Polynesian tongues. Jealous of the trust earned by experience that the crew of the Endeavour give to him. It really is, as Dr. Solander observed, a sort of separate command that Lieutenant Gore has, and now he commands that Cook pay attention to him. Speaking of separate commands and people who think they know better, Mr. Joseph Banks is most interested in this new, imagined land, and he encourages Lieutenant Gore to bring it up once more. And so Lieutenant Gore waits until he has an audience of gentlemen and officers on the quarter-deck. As Joseph Banks watches and Captain Cook approaches, Lieutenant Gore, with a minimum of respect, makes an announcement in his light American accent. "I am of the opinion that what I saw yesterday might be land," he says. Cook knows precisely what he is doing. This is a public announcement of disagreement, to be noted and reported, to be delighted over by Dalrymple and all those armchair continentalists who wish to declare Cook incompetent, to declare there is a land there unlooked for, passed over by a hasty Yorkshireman. But Cook knows when to call a bluff. Mr. Gore imagines a land, and imagines it publicly? Very well, then. We shall all waste the next couple of days searching for a figment. Gore is taken aback when Cook orders him to direct the Endeavour towards his imagining. Cook now makes his own declaration, loudly, publicly, for all those listening to record and remember. "I resolve that nobody shall say that I have left land behind, unsought for. Lieutenant Gore, steer the ship southeast." Yes, other captains have a dictum of no man left behind. For Cook it is no land left behind. 2 days of searching take place, with precisely no result, which is precisely what Captain Cook knew would happen. Lieutenant Gore's cheeks flush red from embarrassment and anger. He has been made to look a fool, a time-wasting fool. His pride is hurt. He has been outwitted by James Cook. Oh, you, Lieutenant Gore, might be experienced with the South Pacific, but James Cook has also been sailing for the better part of his life, and understands both intellectually and intuitively, on both counts much better than the American, how wind, water, and land interact in such a way that they give strong clues as to what lies over the horizon. In this case, nothing. The Continentalists will think twice before they speak of their imaginings again, for they know the captain will destroy their beliefs with a most devastating method. He will listen to them. 24th of February, 1770. Off the east coast of the South Island, a duo of dreamers. When evening falls on this blowy day in late February, the Endeavour veers west, following the coastline, and when the sun returns in the morning, it reveals a vast, empty ocean ahead. Even Banks has to concede just how few people there are on board who maintain the faith that New Zealand is the start of the great southern land, not simply a group of islands. As a matter of fact, he can count his support on the fingers of 2 fingers. Sorry I am to say that in the ship my party is so small that I firmly believe that there are no more heartily of it than myself and one poor midshipman. The rest begin to sigh for roast beef. Indeed, the mood grows ever stronger. There is no great southern land, at least not in these parts. Let us return to England, the land of beef and gravy. All they need to do, it seems, to many of the men, is complete the circumnavigation of this southern landmass, and they should be free to go. 5th of March, 1770. New Zealand. Continental breakfast. As the days pass, the mood of Joseph Banks is in sync with the coastline before him. As it falls away, veering to the west, so does his mood fall, as it seems more likely they are circumnavigating a mere island rather than the great southern land itself. But as it reappears and the likelihood of a continent increases, so does he feel stronger. So it is on this morning, when, as the mist clears, and they can see the smoke from last night's fires on land still trailing in the sky, it is obvious that the shore is trailing away to the west. This, Banks notes, is supposed by the no continents the end of the land. Towards evening, however, it cleared up, and we continents had the pleasure to see more land to the southward. Rarely, if ever, has Captain Cook been so focused on a chart as now. From sun-up to sundown there is the captain gazing at the shore through his spyglass, measuring his angles, making his notations, checking his calculations, then checking both his angles and his calculations again, and again, and again. He must be thorough, there must be no doubt. For this is not just another shore. This is a shore that Mr. Alexander Dalrymple and his fellows of the Continent Club will be minutely examining, on the lookout for any ambiguity, any error which might indicate that there could be a continent there after all, and he will not be gainsaid on exactly how the land lies. When at one point Banks is so intemperate to express his view that land is dangerously near and that the captain must pull the Endeavour back, Cook carefully explains, Mr. Banks, that what you are seeing is a low-lying cloud. Alas for Banks and for the great speculative geographer Alexander Dalrymple, on the 10th of March, 1770, the Endeavour rounds the southern point of a small island lying just off the mainland. He calls the point South Cape, the farthest point south of the South Island. Here Banks accepts that these islands stand alone, as islands. Reluctantly, if gracefully, at least in his private journal, he notes that Captain James Cook has, by his own endeavours, single-handedly destroyed an entire imaginary continent, or at least established it not in this area where Mr. Dalrymple had supposed it to be. Banks concedes defeat. Blew fresh all day, but carried us round the point, to the total demolition of our aerial fabric called continent. Yes, what Captain Cook had thought instinctively since leaving Cape Horn more than a year ago has now been accepted by the gentry on board. It had been all very well for Joseph Banks to dwell on his aerial fabric, his geographical castle in the air, the great southern land, but Captain Cook's knowledge of the elements, his experience in the ocean, his careful map-making has blown it away, at least for now. Now, heading north, along the western side of the South Island, the Endeavour cuts through something that is no less than a long white cloud, a damp fog that nestles on the water with just enough gaps that they can glimpse where they're going, and the land they are outflanking. High above, off to starboard, Cook spies a number of snow-capped mountains, their peaks rising from the haze like icy giants. Impressed by the sheer jagged grandeur of the place, its rugged contours, he notes how the land rises into hills directly from the sea. In the meantime, bit by bit, Joseph Banks is grasping more of the nuances of the natives' language, in part thanks to tutoring by Tupaia and Taito. While in Tahiti, his progress in the basics had been rapid, as it had been a part of his daily intercourse. Here in New Zealand, his exposure to the natives' way of speaking has been less regular. The South Island appears sparsely populated compared to the North, but still a few key things are becoming clear. The genius of the language, especially in the southern parts, he notes in his journal, is to add some particle before a noun, as we do, the or a. The was generally he or ko. They also often add to the end of any word, especially if it is in answer to a question, the word oia, which signifies yes, really, or certainly. With the dawning of this understanding comes the realization that the geographical native names they have been recording for various places around New Zealand have been inaccurate and too long. In the Bay of Islands, he notes by way of example, a very remarkable island was called by the natives Motuaro. Some of our gentlemen asked the name of this from one of the natives, who answered, I suppose as usual, Ke Motuaro. The gentleman, not hearing well the word, repeated his question, on which the Indian again repeated his answer, adding oia to the end of the name, which made it Ke Motuaroia. This way, at least, and no other, can I account for that island being called in the log book, etc., Kamatiwarawaya.
This ends CD 11. CD 12.
On the South Island of New Zealand, the word for the is to, or ta, hence why they have recorded many native names there beginning with that article. It seems obvious to Captain Cook that the natives of New Zealand and those of Tahiti are the one people, and he postulates they have the same notions of the creation of the world, mankind, etc., as the people of the South Seas have. Indeed, many of their notions and customs are the very same. But nothing is so great a proof of their having had one source as their language, which differ but in very few words the one from the other. Finally, after circumnavigating the entire South Island of New Zealand on the 23rd of March, Cook farewells its north-westernmost point, later mulling over the name, for perhaps 3 seconds, in a manner that as ever will not drain his creative reserves. Cape Farewell, perhaps? Cape Farewell it is. Before Cook orders the Endeavour to the west, away from New Zealand, to explore the ocean once more, the coastal winds have other ideas, blowing from the east in a fierce gale, right in the teeth, as Banks records. Forced to grin and bear it, he continues, the sea is certainly an excellent school for patience. As Cook's journal records, as we have now circumnavigated the whole of this country, it is time for me to think of quitting it. 31st of March, 1770. Admiralty Bay, a continent curtailed. There is no great southern land in these parts. James Cook is now absolutely certain of it. But perhaps it lies elsewhere? Cook is already forming his thoughts for another expedition to find exactly that. As he carefully notes in his journal, "Our own voyage has set aside the most, if not all, the arguments and proofs that have been advanced by different authors to prove that there must be a southern continent. I mean to the northward of 40 degrees south." He adds, "Thus I have given my opinion freely and without prejudice, not with any view to discourage any future attempts being made towards discovering the southern continent. On the contrary, as I think this voyage will evidently make it appear that there is left but a small space to the northward of 40 degrees where the grand object can lay. I think it would be a great pity that this thing, which at times has been the object of many ages and nations, should not now be wholly cleared up, which might very easily be done in one voyage." Another grand voyage of exploration, to finally settle the existence or otherwise of the great southern land, lies in the future. What they have just achieved is a cause of great satisfaction. Beyond proving what does not lie in these parts, they have precisely captured what does, having transformed what had been no more than a couple of squiggles on a map left by Abel Tasman 130 years before into a highly detailed map of a magnificent land, populated by a singularly hardy and impressive people. Open parenthesis. In fact, the accuracy of the map of New Zealand will make contemporaries reel. It is so good that 3 years later, when surveying Cook's work, even French navigator Julien-Marie Crozet is moved to offer a paean of praise. "I found it of an exactitude and of a thoroughness of detail which astonished me, beyond all powers of expression, and I doubt much whether the charts of our own French coasts are laid down with greater precision." Close parenthesis. But where to now? Straight back to England, as the vast majority of the ship's company want? No, that is not the Captain Cook way. That would be the easy option. Rather, Cook wishes to find a way of returning home by such a route as might conduce most to the advantage of the service I am upon, and again consults with his officers and gentlemen. All else being equal, he would like to return home by way of the Cape of Good Hope, by a route as far south as possible, so as to exclude the possibility of the great southern land being there too. But everything is not equal. For one thing, as he notes in his journal, in the very depth of winter the condition of the ship in every respect was not thought sufficient for such an undertaking. For the same reason the thoughts of proceeding directly to the Cape of Good Hope was laid aside, especially as no discovery of any moment could be hoped for in that route. And so the solution beckons. Instead of heading straight to the Cape of Good Hope, by going south of New Holland, the better way would be, upon leaving this coast, to steer to the westward, until we fall in with the east coast of New Holland, and then to follow the direction of that coast to the northward, until we arrive at its northern extremity. Again there is agreement from the officers, while Banks, excited by setting foot on an entirely new part of the world, is enthusiastic, with one qualification. "Although we hoped to make discoveries more interesting to trade, at least, than any we had yet made," he records, "we were obliged entirely to give up our first grand object, the southern continent. This, for my own part, I confess I could not do without much regret. That a southern continent really exists, I firmly believe. But if asked why I believe so, I confess my reasons are weak. Yet I have a predisposition in favour of the fact, which I find it difficult to account for." For his part, Tupaia has no care for a southern continent, and no particular interest in new things. He has joined this expedition to get to England to try to understand and then harness the power of the white man, not to visit yet more lands. New Zealand had been fine enough, but the first he has heard of visiting New Holland is now, and, as it is something that will add yet more time till they get to England, he is openly against it. Beyond everything else, as they have entered these southern climes, the falling temperature has seen his own resilience plummet, and he has been complaining to surgeon's mate William Perry of a pain in his stomach and general lethargy. The good mate does his best to make him comfortable, though the Tahitian priest eschews any medicines, his only concession to his health being to try to keep himself out of the wind. Loyal Taito, also feeling the chill in the air, is by his side and will see to his needs. Chapter 10. New Holland. All they seemed to want was for us to be gone, Captain Cook, on the natives of New Holland, in his log, 30th of April, 1770. That they are a very pusillanimous people we had reason to suppose from every part of their conduct, in every place where we were, except Stingray's Bay, and there only the instance of the two people who opposed the landing of our two boats full of men for near a quarter of an hour, and were not to be drove away until several times wounded with small shot, which we were obliged to do, as at the time we suspected their spears to be poisoned from the quantity of gum which was about their points. But upon every other occasion, both there and everywhere else, they behaved alike, shunning us and giving us any part of the country which we landed upon at once. Joseph Banks, 26th of August, 1770. 6 a.m., 19th of April, 1770. Land sighted. Unwelcome to country. First come the telltale birds and marine life. Now gulls, perched atop floating, tangled clumps of long brown seaweed like mermaid tresses, and presently an enigmatic smudge appears on the distant western horizon, slowly revealing itself by the rays of the rising sun, creeping forth. What appears to be little more than a low-lying shadow or cloud becomes ever more apparent. "Land ho!" The call comes from Lieutenant Hicks, positioned on the quarterdeck, and is greeted with great excitement by most aboard the Endeavour. And so Lieutenant Hicks earns himself the good captain's distinction for first land peepers, the first place name on Cook's map of New Holland, Point Hicks, and a gallon of rum. Yo-ho! A howling southerly wind with heavy swells the day before has pushed them north of their intended course, and the captain calculates that they shall see land never seen by another. They are far indeed from Abel Tasman's old explorations. They've also been contending with a strong northerly current since leaving New Zealand, so it's no surprise that, comparing charts and readings, Captain Cook surmises that Van Diemen's Land must be somewhere to the south, into the great unknown. Joseph Banks is not so convinced by the information coming from the captain and his master, noting, "We got fast on to the westward, but the compass showed that the hearts of our people hanging that way caused a considerable north variation, which was sensibly felt by our navigators, who called it a current, as they usually do everything which makes their reckonings and observations disagree." Mistake or intention, what lies ahead is a dream for both Captain Cook and Mr. Banks, unlikely a duo as they make. An uncharted, unexplored land where no European has ever ventured. By the time the sun has risen in the sky enough to mark mid-morning, shining brightly on the land before them, lending it a dusty halo, they are close enough for Joseph Banks to observe the topography, and something else besides. The land was covered in part with trees or bushes, but interspersed with large tracts of sand. At noon we were called upon deck to see 3 waterspouts, which at the same time made their appearance in different places, but all between us and the land. Extraordinary, for these spouts are not from Wales, but are like mini tornadoes, whirling white dervishes of wildness, dancing across the waters with no apparent rhyme or reason. While 2 remain distant, the third roars down upon them and storms about them for all of 15 minutes, allowing Banks to observe it with a scientific eye. It is about the thickness of a mast and goes from a smoke-coloured cloud above to a distance about 2/3 of the way down to the sea itself. Right beneath it, the sea appeared to be much troubled for a considerable space, and from the whole of that space arose a dark-coloured, thick mist which reached to the bottom of the pipe. When it was at its greatest distance from the water, the pipe itself was perfectly transparent, and much resembled a tube of glass or column of water. It expands, it contracts, it sways and dances around, seeming to generate tiny baby spouts all around that attempt to rise from the waves and join their mother, only to fall back defeated. Finally, one baby grows into a hell of a mother, terrifying in its sudden strength and whirling threat, until Mother Nature sags, and the wind curiously whips it down to a child once more, before it gradually disappears altogether. The spirits of this land have spoken to them. You have come to a strange shore filled with strange things. You will see here things you have never seen before. Now, at a latitude of 38 degrees south, and in the longitude of 211 degrees and 7 minutes, it is clear that this land lies due north of the east coast of Van Diemen's Land. Could it be a continuous coastline from there to here? Bringing his spyglass to bear and gazing closely, the captain doubts it, as the coast here seems to veer away to the southwest. James Cook is growing doubtful as to whether they are one land or no. In any case, Captain Cook now sets his sails to the north, hopeful of finding a bay or harbour where they can drop anchor, collect fresh food and water, and perhaps even inspect the bottom of the hull. For the moment, as they proceed north at the rough speed of 5 knots, there is no sign of any human habitation. But on the following day, as they continue north up the coast of what they are now sure is the eastern coast of New Holland, telltale thin streams of smoke coming from the land, spiralling high into the shimmering blue sky, tell a different story. Where there are such smoky columns in the sky, there must be humans at the base, and all those on the Endeavour now gaze expectantly to the shore, hoping to see some sign. The next day again, the smoke from 5 separate fires is seen as they sail along this remarkably green and bushy coastline, protected only by long, pristine beaches, interspersed with regular crops of craggy cliffs, when they see it. Movement on the shore. From the deck of the Endeavour, as they continue to plough north-northeast up the coast, pushed along by a gentle breeze from the southwest, they can suddenly see on this fresh morning silhouetted figures on the impossibly white sands. They appeared to be of a very dark, or black colour, Captain Cook chronicles of the figures, but whether this was the real colour of their skins, or the clothes they might have on, I know not. Banks is less circumspect. In the morn, we stood in with the land near enough to discern 5 people, who appeared through our glasses to be enormously black. So far did the prejudices which we had built on Dampier's account influence us, that we fancied we could see their colour, when we could scarce distinguish whether or not they were men. Captain Cook is more eager than ever to get the Endeavour close enough to the shore so that they can explore this bushy country and hopefully make contact with the natives. But, alas, no harbour appears, and the thunderous white waves pounding on the shoreline make clear the danger for any vessel that gets too close. The surf, in fact, is so rough that Captain Cook doubts there was even security for a boat to land. For just under a week, they continue to make their way up this beautiful coastline, noting ever more smoke plumes from the shore and occasional flitting black figures, until, on the 28th of April 1770, they see 4 natives on the shore, carrying a canoe. Are they, perhaps, hopefully about to put to sea, to make contact with the Endeavour? Alas, no, for not long after they appear, they disappear once more. Perhaps they might be encouraged to come forth to a less imposing vessel. It is with this in mind that Cook gives the order to drop the anchor, and he is soon in the yawl with Mr. Banks, Dr. Solander, Tupaia, and 4 Marines heading to the shore 2 miles away, to the spot where they can now see a handful of coal-black natives sitting on rocks right by their 4 canoes. To Banks's eyes it looks as if the natives are expecting us, and the visitors might at last be about to make genuine contact. Alas, once more, as soon as they get close to the breakers, when we came within about a quarter of a mile, they ran away hastily into the country. Even more aggravating is that Captain Cook dare not risk traversing those massive breakers, and, as Cook will recount, we nowhere could effect a landing by reason of the great surf which beat everywhere upon the shore. There is nothing for the visitors to do but to row back to the Endeavour, the disappointed Banks noting how they were obliged to content ourselves with gazing from the boat at the productions of nature which we so much wished to enjoy a nearer acquaintance with. The trees were not very large, and stood separate from each other, without the least underwood. Among them we could discern many cabbage trees, but nothing else which we could call by any name. An unknown botanical wonderland, holding promise of the novel and the new, the 2 perpetual desires of this old Etonian. To the eyes of Sidney Parkinson, the country looked very pleasant and fertile, and the trees quite free from underwood, appeared like plantations in a gentleman's park. Back to the Endeavour for now. Really, it is the most extraordinary thing. Aboard the good ship HMS Endeavour, the eager men strain forward. Some kind of bay has been spotted, nor by northeast, and Captain Cook has given the orders. Shorten the sails, prepare to loosen the anchor, as the ship nudges towards the gap between the north and south headlands. We are the Guiagal people, of the Yora nation, and we have been here since the Dreamtime. Our people are of this land to the river in the south and to the mountains to the west, while the Gadigal people are from the northern shore to the north. The Guiagal sit in their lightweight canoes made from the stringy paperbark tree, about 14 feet in length, bound tightly at both ends and kept open in the middle by a thwart of sticks. The Guiagal float gently, softly, atop the surface of the water, blending in with the scene around them as though they are not in man-made canoes, but extensions of nature itself. Paddling easily towards the shore, a few of the Guiagal men abandon their fishing, disembark, and hide their slender crafts among the scrub at the top of the beach. Taking their impressive fishing spears and haul of wallamai, the Guiagal fade into the bush, soon indistinguishable in the verdant blur. They must deliver a message. They must warn the others. Do not look for long now, but some visitation from the spirit world is approaching. They will know more soon, but for now the key is not to engage with these spirits in any way, for there might be terrible spiritual consequences. The men remaining in the canoes continue with their fishing, stealing only the tiniest of glances towards the headlands. For it is a very strange thing that is happening, something well beyond their experience, though it may be explained by a visitation from the spirit world. For there a great spirit, a billowing white cloud, has lumbered across the ocean to visit them. It is entering the Kame, the sacred bay, in which they thrive. Through the headlands, closer to shore, it is a big bird with something like possums running up and down about its legs and wings. Yes, a very big bird indeed, with its huge white wings tucked in like a duck's as it makes its way across the waters, and you can tell that the strange white things running all over it might be possums, by the tails they have running down their backs. Only a short time later, the great spirit bird comes to a halt. A sound rings out across the bay, something like rumbling thunder. There is a loud splash, and suddenly they can see that the spirit is releasing a long grey tail into the water. The tail sinks and sinks, before suddenly growing rigid. What on earth is this thing? Small canoes appear from the side of the bird, tiny floating children of the great spirit that birthed them. Into each canoe there seem to be men. Men with pallid skin, untouched by the sun, and each one covered in strange and colourful garb. They are strange men from far away. As the Gwyrgol men move deeper into the bush, the women and children rise from their crouching positions, and they descend from the rocky headland. There are pools and beds full of plump oysters to forage, but they must wait for now. The women fade into the bush after the men, returning to their camp. There, the elders and youngest children will be preparing to find shelter elsewhere for now. Though on edge and watching developments closely, the Gwyrgol are not unduly alarmed by this strange visitation beyond their previous experience. Their world is populated by spirits, who created and guide this world still, and will do so for eternity. Mostly they are unseen, but if this one has chosen to appear, then so be it. Some of the Gwyrgol are so calm they choose to stay by the shore, tending the daily needs of their family, just as they always do at this time of day. Something must be done, though quite what they can do remains unclear. They do not fear it, though they do know they would be fools not to keep a watchful eye on it. What might it want? What does it bring here? Some purpose beyond their comprehension? They will wait and see. Nudging westwards, with the narrow jaws of the headlands reaching out to embrace them, those on board the Endeavour suddenly see people. Black people, holding spears and leaning out of their canoes. The men are staring intently into the water, looking for exactly the right moment to strike the apparently bountiful fish life beneath. Even as the sailors watch, there are several sudden jerks of the arms, the spears thrust down and emerge with a fish on the other end. The most extraordinary thing. Here, the British sailors are aboard a vessel some 1,000 times the size of the natives' canoes, visitors from another world, and the men with spears don't seem to care. As the Endeavour passes, no more than 300 yards away, the men on deck look closer, ever more flabbergasted that the natives neither wave nor shake their fists, nor make with all possible speed to the shore. They just keep fishing, with no more interest in them than they might have had with a floating log drifting on past. This lack of reaction stuns Joseph Banks, who records in his diary that the native men scarce lifted their eyes from their employment. They were totally unmoved by us. Perhaps it is that noise of the surf and their intense focus means that the natives have not seen the visitors? But no. As the Endeavour comes so close that the natives are practically in its shadow, and they still don't look up, it is apparent that theirs really is either genuine or studied indifference, but not accidental ignorance. It really seems as if the fish they have been hunting for millennia are of more interest to them than this visitation from another world that just might be hunting them. As the Endeavour continues to move slowly into the bay, Tupaia draws the scene, sketching the fishermen who have no eye for them. Beyond the natives in canoes, they can see on the northern shore a few more natives around a fire. Both men and women were quite naked, very lean and raw-boned. Their complexion was dark, their hair black and frizzled, their heads unadorned, and the beards of the men bushy. The Endeavour moves on, her crew standing at the gunwale, stupefied by the indifferent welcome, and, well, a little disappointed. It seems that, unlike their time in Tahiti, there will be no bare-breasted women heading their way any time soon. Captain Cook gives the order close to the southern shore of the bay, just inside the lip of the southern heads. The boatswain pipes his whistle, and the anchor is soon falling to the bottom. Less than 1,000 yards off, up on the tree line, they can see close a village, or perhaps just a smattering of a scattering of dwellings, about half a dozen rough habitations, appearing to be little more than bark lean-tos, the like of which the Englishmen have never seen. The village appears to be empty, but even as they are gazing upon it, an old woman followed by 3 children came out of the wood. She carried several pieces of stick, and the children also had their little burdens. When she came to the houses, 3 more younger children came out of one of them to meet her. Again, watching her, the British sailors are stunned. She often looked at the ship, but expressed neither surprise nor concern. And nor do the children, who, so young they are clearly incapable of artifice of any kind, clearly genuinely don't care. Can you believe it? For the life of them, the British visitors cannot work it out. True, after a while some of the natives deign to shake weapons at them, which is the smallest of signs that they care at all. But still, most of them can't be bothered to look at all, and those who do, in the face of the biggest man-made thing they've ever seen by a factor of 1,000, look the human manifestation of a bored yawn. Now the old woman lights a fire, which sees those in the canoes who had so resolutely ignored the Endeavour men return to the shore with their catch and drag their canoes from the water, whereupon they all began to dress their dinner, to all appearance totally unmoved at us, though we were within a little more than half a mile of them. In Patagonia, Terra del Fuego, Tahiti, New Zealand, and every other far-flung land the Endeavour has visited, the sheer size of the ship had either amazed, intimidated, or angered their hosts. But here in New Holland, the locals appear not to care. An odd people. And odder still for something else Banks notices through his spyglass. Of all these people we had seen so distinctly through our glasses, we had not been able to observe the least sign of clothing. Myself, to the best of my judgment, plainly discerned that the woman did not copy our mother Eve, even in the fig leaf. Is this an Eden so divine that it will not even acknowledge the serpent that enters it? Captain Cook is curious to find out, with a proper landing at last. And where better than this grouping of indifferent spectators, hoping that, as they regarded the ships coming into the bay so little, they would as little regard our landing. Still, there will be no chances taken, and Cook gives orders for the pinnace, the yawl, and the longboat to be filled with armed marines and sailors, 40 men in all, for this crucial first landing on this side of New Holland. In the yawl are Cook, Banks, Tupaia, Sidney Parkinson with drawing materials, Dr. Solander, and the 17-year-old cousin of Cook's wife, Elizabeth, Isaac Smith, with the captain's vessel heading off in the lead. When they near the shore, it seems as well that they are so numerous and so well armed, for the closer they get to actually setting foot on the beach, the more it becomes apparent that they will be opposed. For the natives, allowing this thing into this bay is one thing, but foreigners setting foot on this land? No. As the boats are approaching the rocks, 2 brave native warriors suddenly come down upon them, each man bearing a 10-foot spear in one hand and some kind of implement in the other, which Joseph Banks is sharp enough to surmise is a machine to throw the spear. A small shaft with a kind of cup on one end to hold the blunt end of the spear. It allows the thrower, with a few steps forward, to put the full force of his body behind the spear as he hurls it. And their words and actions seem every bit as threatening. They called to us, Banks will recount, very loud in a harsh-sounding language of which neither us or Tupaia understood a word, shaking their spears and menacing, in all appearance resolved to dispute our landing to the utmost, though they were but 2, and we 30 or 40 at least. These are, no doubt about it, brave men. Within their clan, there has been no little confusion about these visitors, and not just because of the colour of their skin, their coverings, their general lack of beards, and the means by which they arrive. It is their total lack of ceremony, their failure to seek a spiritual blessing from the Guiagal people to pass through their land, if that is indeed what they are doing. They must be challenged, and the 2 most senior men of the clan have been sent forth. Sidney Parkinson observes them very carefully, noting the intricate piercings and markings on the warriors, how some of whom were painted white, having a streak around their thighs, 2 below their knees, one like a sash over their shoulders, which ran diagonally downwards, and another across their foreheads. Far from mere decorations, Such markings and piercings are actually part of their intricate culture, bespeaking their status within the clan, their spiritual education, their seniority. The warriors yell at them, "Leave! Leave our land! Leave us!" Resolutely, hoping to indicate that they come in peace, Cook and Tupaia yell back their salutations in English and Tahitian respectively, none of which calms the locals. The two natives still insist that the new people must return whence they came, and clearly indicate that the visitors will face a fight if they try to land. Their countenance bespoke displeasure, Sidney Parkinson records. They threatened us and discovered hostile intentions. We mean it, we are not backing off, but the white men won't go away, and try in their own language and gestures to make clear that they come in peace. In this manner, Banks chronicles, we parleyed with them for about a quarter of an hour, they waving to us to be gone, we again signing that we wanted water, and that we meant them no harm. Still there is no sign of the natives ceding a single step. Perhaps they could be cajoled into giving way? It is with this in mind that, as Captain Cook will recount, they resolved to throw them some nails, beads, etc., ashore, which they took up, and seemed not ill-pleased with. The natives' actions at this point are not clear, but momentarily they are encouraging enough that, as Cook records, I thought that they beckoned to us to come ashore. Surely they will lower their spears and step away, allowing a landing. But no, Cook is mistaken. For as soon as we put the boat in, they again came to oppose us. After 15 minutes, the captain becomes impatient. This cannot go on all afternoon. They need to land. These warriors are blocking their way. They have to be moved on so the shore can be made safe for Englishmen. Lieutenant Gore's impatience has a different angle. It is tightly focused on his captain. For these men on shore are armed and dangerous savages, needlessly putting at risk every civilized man on this English boat. The captain might be taking the stance of the Quakers. The first blow shall not be theirs, but that puts us all at risk. Surely we must get our retaliation in first. In New Zealand, they shot a man who sneakily crept up behind their captain on the shore. In New Holland, are they to sit in a boat and simply wait to be speared? Gore is in no mood for speculation on the distance that a spear might fly, but James Cook is torn. What did New Zealand teach them if not the folly of lives unnecessarily lost? Diplomacy is preferable. But there is no avenue to pursue it, as there is no shared tongue, no understanding. Truly, the only message that has so far crossed the language divide has been a very clear "we do not want you here" from the native men. These are warriors, not diplomats, and the duo urge departure with unmistakable and unrelenting vigour. Something must be done. A decision must be made. James Cook is lost in a struggle between caution and common sense. Lieutenant Gore, the first white man to shoot a native in both Tahiti and New Zealand, stands off one shoulder, willing him to shoot, while Banks stands at the other, understanding why the captain hesitates. The agitation on the shore grows and grows. Something must be done. Lieutenant Gore looks to his captain. Mr. Banks looks to Lieutenant Gore. Gore's look is clear. Do you want one of us to die by the hand of a native? Shoot! Finally, Cook decides he must take the matter into his own hands, specifically a musket. Carefully he brings it to bear, aiming right between the two men, and gently squeezes the trigger. There is a flash, an acrid puff of smoke, a God-almighty roar, and in that frozen moment, the youngest of the two warriors drops his bundle of spears on the rock at the instant in which he heard the report, something which appears to bring a sharp rebuke from the older warrior, for the younger man just as quickly regathers them, and the two are as they were once more, threatening, blocking, willing for a fight. They do more than that. The elder man picks up a stone and hurls it. As it whistles past Cook's ear, he comes to a key decision. If he and his men are not to be received hospitably, Voluntarily, it will have to be insisted upon, by force. Again he brings what he will describe as a second musket, loaded with small shot, to bear and takes careful aim. But this time, instead of aiming it between the warriors, he aims it at the legs of the older warrior who has hurled the rock at him, and squeezes the trigger. His intention is not to kill, but to sting, and so frighten them into the woods. Nevertheless, it is effectively a shot that will ring through history, as the commander of the first English troop, and even troops, to arrive on the Australian continent visits violence on a people who've been there for 60,000 years, even before he has set foot on the land. For again there is a roar, but this time instead of the shot flying harmlessly, it indeed hits the elder man in the legs, bringing up angry red splotches on his black skin. Though stunned and stung, glaring down at these splotches which have come from nowhere, but are somehow connected to these extraordinary white-skinned visitors with their thundersticks, still the old warrior and his younger companions stand their ground. Isaac Smith, not unreasonably under the circumstances, hesitates long enough that Captain Cook follows up with the order, "Jump out, Isaac!" "But, Captain, the warriors, the spears." "Very well, then." Putting his best foot forward, that foot comes down on soft sand, and Isaac Smith becomes the first European to walk on the land of the Gweagal people. Immediately behind Smith comes Captain Cook and Joseph Banks, both hopeful that the previous unpleasantness with the warriors will have seen them disappear. But no. For now here they are again. Despite being vastly outnumbered, they are just 2 men against 30 or 40 men in 2 vessels, and despite the fact that the invaders have thundersticks capable of hurting them at a great distance, what had appeared to the white men to be the retreat of the natives was not that. They had merely gone to get their biggest weaponry, long spears, some 15 feet in length, with cruelly sharpened points. One of them also has, Sidney Parkinson notes, a shield of an oval figure painted white in the middle, with 2 holes in it to see through, and also a wooden sword. The warriors, who have been hurling spears since they were knee-high to an emu, now run at the intruders, and hurl their pointed wooden shafts from a distance of perhaps 40 yards. The spears arc through the air towards the freshly landed men of the Endeavour, occasioning a mad scramble to jump out of the way in time. The spears, Banks notes, fell among the thickest of us, but hurt nobody. Not counting perhaps Sidney Parkinson's sense of equanimity, and perhaps even his draws, as he records, "After we had landed, they threw 2 of their spears at us, one of which fell between my feet." Captain Cook fires a 3rd musket shot. Now, as 2 more shots follow up, the elder of the 2 natives holds his ground long enough to hurl 1 more spear, which bears the same result. He has the satisfaction of seeing the white men scurry out of the way, but that is all. His shield has been hit and dropped. The warriors call repeatedly, imploring support from their fellows. Alas, no support arrives. Reluctantly, the 2 defenders of their land at last retreat. Now and only now do Cook and his men advance, scooping up the shield as they go, for it might be useful. Banks yells out a warning. "The spears are poisoned!" This, Cook will note, made me cautious as to how I advanced into the woods. But advance they all do, heading up the hill into the bush to the houses, curious small huts made of the bark of trees. With a practical bent, Midshipman James Margra has a close look at how they are constructed, and records them as very simple structures, being made from bark, enfolding one side or half the trunk of a tree, which they had tied together at each end by a kind of flexible twig, and spread and separated in the middle by pieces of wood placed across from side to side. At first it seems that all of the natives have gone, but no, for as Sidney Parkinson notes with some distress, the wives and children set up a most horrid howl. Where are they? "We went up to the houses," Banks records, "in one of which we found the children hid behind the shield and a piece of bark, in one of the houses. They see no wives, but there are 4 or 5 very small children there, seemingly left in a kind of bark stall which hides them, and makes it difficult for the intruders to get a full view of them. Cook is unsettled. What to do with these? Cook only decides after talking to Banks. We were conscious from the distance the people had been from us when we fired that the shot could have done them no material harm. We therefore resolved to leave the children on the spot without even opening their shelter. After all, as soon as the white men return to the Endeavour, the children's people will return and they will be cared for. The most important thing now is to try to win back the natives, to convince them that, despite now having fired on one of them, no fewer than 3 times, the boat visitors really have come in peace. Perhaps some baubles, which have worked such wonders in other isles of the Pacific, might do the trick. We therefore, Banks will recount, threw into the house to them some beads, ribbons, cloths, etc., as presents, and went away. Oh, and as a precaution against having a repetition of the previous unpleasantness, Banks notes they do one other thing. We, however, thought it no improper measure to take away with us all the spears which we could find about the houses, amounting in number to 40 or 50. They were of various lengths, from 15 to 6 feet in length. Both those which were thrown at us and all we found, except one, had 4 prongs headed with very sharp fish bones. Banks is still worried that some greenish-coloured gum on the tip of the spears may be poison, but Cook thinks that these are fishing spears, nothing more. His reasoning? Well, surely the fact that each of them has seaweed stuck in their 4 prongs is a clue. Returning to the shore, where their vessels had been left under guard, Cook takes the opportunity to get a closer look at the 3 native canoes that have been left nearby, and pronounces them the worst, I think, I ever saw. Now, one last thing before they leave. Look for a supply of fresh water. There obviously must be plenty nearby to sustain the natives, but for the moment none is found except a little in a small hole dug in the sand. Very well, then. And now it is time for them all to head across to the other side of the bay, where they had seen people on the way in, stopping off briefly at the Endeavour to offload the spears. Upon reaching the northern bank, however, they find there are no natives to be seen, and though Cook finds rock pools full of fresh water, it is too hard to get at to try to water the ship with any efficiency. As they pull away from the shore and re-embark the ship, Captain Cook has much to contemplate. Yes, they have made a landing and established contact with the natives, but the fact that he had personally fired his musket upon them is distressing. As night falls and the Endeavour men gaze on the shore, it is to see many lights all around the bay, small flickering fires that indicate night fishing, just as they had seen in Tahiti. These people, however, seem very unlike the Polynesians, who populate the rest of the South Pacific. They appear to be a breed apart. Joseph Banks, from a scientific point of view, records his detailed impressions of these strange new people in his journal before dropping off to sleep. The people were blacker than any we have seen in the voyage, though by no means Negroes. Their beards were thick and bushy, and they seemed to have a redundancy of hair upon those parts of the body where it commonly grows. The hair of their heads was bushy and thick, but by no means woolly like that of a Negro. They were of a common size, lean, and seemed active and nimble. Their voices were coarse and strong. By a fire, well back in the bush from the strange encounter of this day, there is deep discussion among this tribe of the Guiagal people as to what it all means. The 2 warriors who have come closest to the strangers are intensely questioned, and the strange wounds of the elder one across his thighs and buttocks closely examined. Both warriors agree. While it had been thought that these beings had been spirits returning from the afterlife, or possibly enormous possums, that is not the case. The intruders are powerful and dangerous, but they are men, after all, and the enormous things still floating in, amazingly, exactly the same spot, is some kind of big vessel or floating island, and not a big bird or a low-lying cloud. In all their years, they have never heard tell of such a spirit, and it is tens of thousands of moons that the clans of the Eora nation have lived in harmony with the great spirits and the land, prospering, thriving off this copious coast, this bountiful bay. The Eora are a massive mob, spread out across the harbour's rivers and coves, each one acting as a natural divider between clans that, at least for the most part, get on with each other. Of course, from time to time there are disputes. Spears fly thick and fast when there is a call for it, though that day is not today. For now they work in cooperation. The Eora have never seen anything quite like it, nothing so large or so imposing. Racing like a great wildfire, word of the billowing spirit spreads throughout the Guiagal clan's territory, the southern end of the majestic Kame. Transmitted by tongue, word reaches over the river to the Bidjigal clan, then jumps again over the next river to the Kamagal on the northern end. Before long, it approaches the banks of Birabiragal, that extraordinarily grand harbour, just a day or two's walk north from Kamagal Bay. The waters are calm, while the shores teem with activity. Since the beginning of the Dreamtime, the Gadigal people of the Eora nation have thrived on the southern shores of this expanse. Gadigal women launch their Nawi from the southern banks, while the men spear fish from the shore, and women with children forage on the rocks, venturing at low tide to a point of sheer exquisite beauty, covered in white shells. For yes, it is here that the oyster beds brim with plump bounty, and the shells are shimmering. The Gadigal often perform ceremonies and feasts on this tongue of land that protrudes out into the harbour, being sure to come back before the tide turns and rises, transforming the point into an island once more. Many clans live around the munificent harbour, its inlets and rivers acting as natural boundaries between the Gadigal clan and such clans as the Guiagal to their south and the Gurulgul across the water to the north. To the west are the Wangal people of the Parramatta River that feed the harbour from the west. By the shores of the river on this day, a very young lad, Benalong, who is newly proud to have at last outgrown the spot of toddlers squished between his mother's knees as she fishes from her canoe, is now walking the shoreline himself, spearing snapper with his pronged fishing spear. One day soon, he hopes, he will be able to use a stone axe to cut sheets of bark from trees and so build his own canoe and guide it out into deeper waters to fish like his elders. But now what? There is a stirring among his elders. Stories pass along. It seems that strange-looking men with pallid skin and ornate dress have arrived coming and going as if apparitions. Young Benalong listens closely as his people try to fathom what it means. Bizarre, befuddling, James Cook enters the abandoned camp on the southern shore and looks inside the hut where the children had been the day before. They are gone, but the beads, ribbons and cloth are still scattered about the ground. Captain Cook stares in momentary disbelief. How many times have the natives of other lands fallen over themselves to gain hold of things as simple as an iron nail? These natives have been handed a glut of goodies the likes of which they have never seen, and they respond with ingratitude? No, that isn't quite right. It is not disrespect, it is something simpler. It is straightforward indifference. For whatever the reason, they just do not care for these small, valuable things the white men have brought to their shores. Extraordinary. All that Captain Cook can presume is that probably the natives were afraid to take them away. Very well then. We will be here for at least a few days. Lieutenant Hicks, have the animals brought to shore to graze, and get together a watering party. A small stream has been found close by the shore, and if we make a small dam, it will be sufficient to water the ship. For his part, Captain Cook goes in active search of the disappeared natives, taking the pinnace to explore the bay, in the doing of which I saw some of the natives, but they all fled at my approach. I landed in 2 places, one of which the people had but just left, as there were small fires and fresh mussels broiling upon them. Here, likewise, lay vast heaps of the largest oyster shells I ever saw. Only a minute or so after Cook's party get back in their vessels to be rowed back to the Endeavour, the natives magically reappear on the shore. They walk right past the water casks that the white men have left, take their own canoes, and paddle off. Cook and his men shift uncomfortably on their planks. They had gone to the shore to observe the natives, but now it is clear that they have been under close observation the whole time. Late that afternoon, the watering party of a dozen sailors, under the command of Lieutenant Zachary Hicks, go to shore back at their original landing place and are going about their business, rolling casks up the beach and digging to increase the stream's flow, when a group of 15 natives, all armed with spears and wooden swords, approach to within 100 yards, meaning the sailors instantly bring their muskets to bear in case of attack. They stop. When just 2 of the warriors come forward, the sailors do the same and send 2 of their own forward to meet them, bearing some of the trinkets they have brought with them. But it was to no purpose. All they seemed to want was for us to be gone. After staying a short time, they went away. It is becoming ever more clear all the natives want is for the white men to go, to leave them in peace. They do not want gifts, beyond the greatest gift of all, to be left alone. After dinner, Captain Cook goes to shore to raise the English colours, the Union Jack soon flapping a little listlessly from a temporary flagpole. A sharpened staff then oversees an important ritual. An inscription is cut into a tree near the watering place, setting forth the ship's name, the date, and that it had landed here on a mission for King George III, under the command of Captain James Cook. Some of the men continue to gather water as the captain heads out with some jacks to sound the bay. As it turns out, plumbing the depths provides an extraordinary bounty, as while swinging the lead, they also do some fishing, and in a cove on the north shore pull out an extraordinary 300 pounds of fish. Typical of Captain Cook, he orders Cook Thompson to divide the bounty equally among the ship's company, with nothing extra for the captain, officers, or gentlemen. With few fresh fish in recent times, it is most welcome. Joseph Banks, Dr. Solander, and Mr. Banks's favourite greyhound lady, meanwhile, start carefully tramping through the fascinating bush, always on the lookout for dangerous natives, and are immediately stunned by the array of fresh wonders that greet their every step. With each new discovery, they carefully cut the flower or leaves or stems and place them in the vasculums, wooden vessels specifically designed to store botanical items. So stunning is the array of new botanical items, trees, flowers, bushes, grasses, that the vasculums quickly fill, and Mr. Banks has to send for more. The flora is flabbergasting. Joseph Banks runs his fingers through the thin green leaves of Acacia longifolia, marvelling at the vibrant yellow of this coastal wattle and excising several black and gold seeds from the twisted pods growing along it. My God, what a specimen! The good doctor is busy as well, though he hasn't the time or the eyeline to notice the wattles. His eyes are trained upon the ground, where he spots a small shrub of Boronia parviflora. Such a very hurried and harried-looking shrub, though among the sharp triangular leaves hide tiny delicate petals. A pale, precious pink, they are each less than an inch long, and more beautiful than a chrysanthemum in spring. He feels like a prospector who has suddenly stumbled upon dozens of diamonds in the rough, but reminds himself to take a step back. Slowly, slowly, doctor. All care must be exercised. Every precaution must be taken. Carefully gathering each of his specimens and accounting for everything, Solander moves excitedly, if deliberately, through the bushy undergrowth. For his part, Captain Cook, exploring parts of the bay in the pinnace, is stunned by the number of stingrays he spies. Great grey diamonds, glide through the water, ghostly shapes that move in harmony with the water. They are enormous creatures, one of them all black and measuring 2 yards across by nearly 5 yards long, including the sting in the tail. "They tasted very much like European rays," Sidney Parkinson records, "and the viscera had an agreeable flavour, not unlike stewed turtle. These rays and shellfish are the natives' chief food." Carefully the Gwiggle observe the white intruders. They see them walking on their land, fishing in the bay, walking with those bizarre animals that look like long, tall dingoes with big snouts, a group of men with nets and curious cutting and digging implements poking around among the long grass and the waratah bushes, sometimes cutting pieces off and, mysteriously, putting them in the bags they carry, before carrying them away. Others walk along the shore, prizing off oysters from rocks, while still others are rolling something that looks round and wooden towards the small stream, where the water trickles just enough they can fill the round wooden things, filling them to the top, then closing up with loud banging upon more wood, and then they roll it back to their big canoes waiting on the shoreline. From the looks of them, the white men seem very frustrated at the lack of water they collect, which makes them appear very stupid. It seems amazing that they don't know how easy it is to get fresh water whenever you need it. Everyone knows that. Far easier than getting water from the tiny stream or by digging holes in the sand, as some of the white men are now doing. You simply follow the signs. The rivers, creeks, rock wells, lakes, lagoons, seas and springs, left by the ancestral spirits who created the sources of water in the first place, and still guide its ongoing supply. As the Gwiggle have learned since they first could walk, you simply need to watch the flight of the birds, track the rhythms of the movements of the animals, or even heed the signs left by other Gwiggle, artworks upon a tree trunk, or a pile of oyster shells. The signs, natural and man-made, are everywhere as to which way the water-filled rock holes, creeks and springs lie. And if ever those sources did not provide, everyone knows the roots of certain trees only have to be tapped before they burst open, water flowing freely. But these ignorant visitors clearly know less than a 3-year-old about any such basic know-how. If only the strange white men looked. If only they hunted silently, again and again, with a spear or boomerang, as many times as you or your family need. Yes, those thundersticks give them a power which it is hard to understand, but in every other way they seem so primitive. Perhaps they will go, as quickly and as mysteriously as they have come. It seems not. At one point they are even seen to have some kind of ceremony of their own, as they stand around in a circle and plant a piece of fabric, red, white and blue, in crosses, on the end of a stick, and put it in the ground. Might it be that they plan to stay? It couldn't be, surely. Visitors never stay in these parts. They sometimes pass through, yes, but only after following a strict protocol, where the visitors, like those of the Bidjigal clan on the opposite shore, hover on the edge of Gwiggle land, often on the very shores, until they are approached and welcomed to country. But the intruders have done none of these things. It is all very confusing. The next day there is yet another odd interaction. While Joseph Banks, his dogs, and the doctor head off into the bush, a troop of grass cutters head off to some nearby grassy terrain to gather grass for the sheep. While they are so engaged with their scythes, towards them came 14 or 15 Indians, having in their hands sticks that shone, said the sergeant of Marines, like a musket. The officer, on seeing them, gathered his people together. The hay cutters coming to the main body appeared like a flight, so the Indians pursued them, however, but a very short way, for they never came nearer than just to shout to each other, maybe a furlong. At night they came again in the same manner, and acted over again the same half-pursuit. Half-pursuit? Yes, exactly that. The natives want to chase them away. They don't actually want a full fight, rather just to warn them off, just as the English don't want a battle themselves. They just want contact. As time goes on, this strange half-pursuit, half-dance continues, to the growing frustration of the intruders. Myself in the evening, Banks records, for the 30th of April, landed on a small island on the northern side of the bay to search for shells. In going, I saw 6 Indians on the main, who shouted to us, but ran away into the woods before the boat was within half a mile of them, although she did not even go towards them. This is not first contact. It is first ignoring. 30th of April, 1770, Botany Bay. Cook explores alone. No takers. All up, Captain Cook is impressed with this strange landscape and the possibilities for some kind of European outpost. They have enough fresh water, while wood for fuel abounds all round. Some of the trees, he notes approvingly, are as large or larger than our oaks in England, and grow a good deal like them, providing a highly valuable kind of hardwood, while another sort of tree grows tall and straight, something like pines. The country is woody, low and flat, as far in as we could see, and I believe that the soil is in general sandy. In the woods are a variety of very beautiful birds, such as cockatoos, lorikeets, parrots, etc., and crows, the last exactly like those we have in England. Evening is falling, at the end of the kind of gloriously sunny day that this land seems to have such a bountiful supply of, and as Cook stands on the deck of the Endeavour, gazing at the shore, as ever trying for the life of him to work out what kind of a people the natives are, he looks again, but more closely. For there they are. About 10 of them have suddenly appeared on the shore near the spot where the visitors have been able to successfully dig for fresh water. Now, Cook is not an impulsive man. Most of the moves he makes could be taken straight from the Royal Navy captain's textbook for proper behaviour. Anything that strays from that is usually deeply reflected on. But just this once, he acts on instinct and moves quickly. With no weaponry at all, he has himself rowed ashore. He wants to meet with the natives face to face, man to men. He is trusting that they won't attack him, and he wishes to earn their trust, to demonstrate that he has no desire to attack them. Yes, he was the man a few days ago who had fired his musket at them, but he hopes that they won't be holding a grudge, and so he stands at the front of the boat, arms wide to show he comes in peace, as it nudges towards the shore where they are grouped. But this is not going to be easy, for when he is only 50 yards off, the natives move away from the beach and melt away. Undaunted, Cook alights on the shore, and despite the aghast looks of his men, who cannot quite believe what their captain is doing, pursues the natives into the bush, entirely alone. But, as Cook will recount, they would not stop. These were armed in the same manner as those that came yesterday. Carefully, not sure if this is madness or not, Cook scrunches along the sandy shore, following them. A lone English captain, who has himself caused injury just days ago to one of the most respected of the Guigal warriors. Yes, come to think of it, this is madness. And yet he still goes on, for now Cook sees the natives up ahead again. Are they waiting for him? Expecting him? He is not sure. But they are just there, perhaps 100 yards ahead, and he must make a decision. Advance or retreat? A little way off, the bush is filled with extraordinary sounds of the falling evening. Insects hum, birds chirrup. In the distance there is the sound of twigs breaking, as some large animal moves through the thick undergrowth. Alone, all alone. Just 20 minutes ago he was safe on the deck of the Endeavour, surrounded by men with guns, bayonets, and cannon. And now, of his own volition, unarmed, unaccompanied, and quite possibly unhinged, now that he comes to think of it, he is isolated on a foreign shore, with armed warriors, out of range of those on the Endeavour, even now looking through their spyglasses for some sign of him. It is getting darker still. Back on the beach, his men await, but they have no idea where he is. If the natives were to rush him now, he would be dead within seconds. But what an opportunity! It was his original intent to show trust in them and meet them man to men, and so gain their trust. And here they are now, waiting for him. What to do? The crickets roar. Captain Cook, observing prudence, turns on his heel and quickly walks back along the shore to where his infinitely relieved men quickly whisk him away.
This ends CD 12.